Chapter 192. With sufficient supplies, Su Len began to upgrade some buildings in the northern city. Because the city had not been upgraded before, the levels of the buildings were limited. The first to be upgraded was the Lord's Castle and the blacksmith shop. Because all the residents in the inner city had been relocated, the entire inner city was empty. Su Len began to expand the area of the Lord's Castle. After the entire Lord's Castle was upgraded, in addition to the place for him to live, there was also a place for the Lord's guards and their families to live. The drill ground in the Lord's Castle also needed to be expanded. The stables, barracks, and so on needed to be expanded. Su Len was ready to officially form a Lord's Guard. Originally, the Lord's Guard was held by the barbarians. The barbarians were very aggressive, but their defense was almost zero. So he planned to form a guard that cooperated with defense. Spearmen and archers were working together to form a small group of cavalry that would be used to transmit information and investigate. The Lord's Guard would not be too big. There were about 200 people in total. The number of people would be selected from the army to join. After Sullen's order was issued, it only took a day for the Lord's Guard to be officially formed. The army was short of 200 people, but they continued to choose from the militia to replace them. In addition to forming the Lord's Guard, Su Len planned to build several fountains in the outer city. In addition to the fountain in the central square of the northern city, the commercial district, as a bustling area, also needed a large fountain. The fountain's existence was not only to beautify the city, but also to prevent or extinguish fires. In this era, there were no fire engines. A large number of houses were made of wood and other flammable materials. Once a fire broke out, it was likely to affect a lot of people. Even in modern society, fire was still a disaster that could not be eradicated. Every time a fire broke out, it would cause a huge loss. Su Len had read some information in his previous life. The capital of the Northern Song dynasty, Bianjing, had more than 50 major recorded fires in more than 100 years. Basically, there would be one every 2 or 3 years. Several fires had burned down thousands of houses and caused heavy casualties. Su Len did not want the city he had built so hard to be burned down. Therefore, after choosing an area in each area of the outer city, he built fountains. At the same time, he asked the residents and merchants of each market to form their own fire brigade. Usually, these people were just like ordinary people except for some training. Once a fire broke out, they would quickly organize and use the water from the fountains to put out the fire. All the part-time fire brigade members would be rewarded with points and money. Although the fire brigade formed in this way was not very professional, all the areas in the city were divided. Every market had its own fire brigade. At the same time, Su Len also planned to form a professional fire brigade after the population of the city continued to increase. The other fire brigades would be their complement. The construction of the city proceeded in an orderly manner. Many flowers and plants were planted in the flower beds on both sides of the road. Trees had even been transplanted from the outside on both sides of the road. These were all done by Chris. The abyss where the little succubus used to live was called Paradise. At this moment, Su Len saw Chris instructing a few barbarian warriors and half-elves to plant flowers and trees. In front of Su Len, Chris was very obedient. After all, Su Len could easily suppress her. Even if she was best at fighting on the bed, Sullen's plasma cannon could still defeat her. However, she was only obedient and sensible in front of Su Len. In front of others, Chris was secretly called a witch. "Humph, you bunch of idiots, hurry up and bring that big tree over. Be careful when you move, don't break it." Chris flew in the air and waved her small leather whip, making a loud and clear sound. "And you half-elves? I really don't understand. You are so clumsy. How do you have the bloodline of elves? I think even the goblins are more agile than you. You have to complete the greening of this road today. You can arrange the rest of the time as you wish. But if you can't complete it, Hee hee. Chris looked at the barbarians and half-elves with a mischievous smile. She seemed to have some bad thoughts. I don't remember practicing charm. What happened last time? Two barbarian warriors kissing and hugging in the central square. Or was it a half-elf tied up in a tortoise shell and begging to be whipped? I don't remember. A few barbarians and half-elves who were working couldn't help but shiver. These barbarians and half-elves were afraid of Chris not because of her strength. On the contrary, Chris rarely used force. It was because her charm was too strong. Even the female drow, Karina, couldn't be sure that she would be immune to it. The others were even less of a match for her. After being controlled by her charm, Chris would order them to do all kinds of shameful things, such as being naked, courting, or being tied up. These were all her ideas. Now, her deterrence in the territory was higher than Sullen's. At least, even if they made a mistake, Sulan wouldn't let them run naked. Chris. Don't scare them. Sulan walked over and said. Yes, master. Chris quickly put away her whip and flew to Sullen's side, pretending to be an obedient child. Work hard. Don't bully them. Sulan reached out his hand and knocked Chris's little head. Yes, master. Chris nodded. The school had been established for some time, and the first batch of students in the territory had already been learning for some time. The adult learning speed was even faster. So far, they had already learned hundreds of words and addition and subtraction below 1,000 digits. Only the basic subjects were taught here. After all the staff in the city hall had been trained, children would be admitted to the school. In fact, Sulan had planned to build a wizard school in the territory. However, after learning about the consumption of wizards, he decisively gave up on this unrealistic idea. Because of the harvest altar, the crops in the northern town had matured in advance. Crops like potatoes took a little more than 100 days to grow, but with the harvest altar, the potatoes in the territory only needed 70 days to mature. Other than potatoes, the sugar beets in the territory had also been shortened from a year to a little more than 200 days. Now that half of the harvest had passed, the sugar beets in the territory would be harvested in a while. Now that the potatoes had matured, Sulan temporarily stopped developing the land and focused on harvesting the potatoes. The importance of food in the wasteland was self-evident. If the harvesting speed in the territory slowed down, the goblins and kobolds would take the risk to come and dig. Because of the harvest altar and the farm manure, the yield of all the farms in the northern town had increased. The yield per mu had increased from 300 kilograms to 400 kilograms. In total, 2 million kilograms of potatoes were harvested from 5,000 mu of land. Such a large amount of food was enough to feed the northern town for a year. As for the wheat, oats, and other crops, they still needed a few more days to mature. After the harvest, Sulan realized that the original granary was a little too small. It could not fit all the food they harvested this time. Sulan arranged for people to expand the granary, and the other part was sent to the basement of the Lord's mansion to store. After harvesting all the potatoes, the large amount of labor in the territory was also released. They started building a moat outside the northern town. The inner town walls were also being reinforced. The original 5-meter-high and 1-meter-wide walls were being built according to the standards of the outer town. A real shipyard was being built at the port. Living off the mountain, living off the water. The northern town had mountains and water. Other than the lack of transportation, it could be said that it was blessed by the heavens. There were countless treasures in the Sierra de Lotus, but Sulan had no way to mine them at the moment. Even if he knew that there should be a lot of minerals here, the level of civilization in this era might not be enough. Currently, the focus of the territory was still on the Red Sand River and the Whitewater River. Whether it was transportation or fishing, they were all very important to the development of the city. The fishing boats that were built last year were basically scrapped. Sulan started building a shipyard after he had enough people. The wood used to build ships usually took a few years to dry in the shade, but Sulan did not have the time to waste. So, Sulan used the baking method. It sped up the drying process, and then used the wood to build ships. Fishing boats were no longer the only way to fish in the northern town. They used fishing nets to block the river, and then worked together to catch the fish. In the evening, Sulan returned to his territory after a busy day. The construction of the moat had started. The moat of the northern town was a branch of the Red Sand River, and then the water was diverted into the moat. It was a huge project, and would take a long time to complete. "Phew, Angela, come and massage my shoulders." Sulan was too lazy to move after lying down on the chair. Sulan's rocking chair was carefully made by the craftsman under his guidance. It was very comfortable to lie down on. The little maid was very obedient today. She obediently walked over and massaged Sulan with her chubby little hands. In terms of massage skills in the Lord's castle, Annie was still the best. Her technique was the best. However, Angela was not bad either. Her hands were soft, and her chubby little hands were very comfortable to massage. The soft little hands pressed on his shoulders. Sulan was so comfortable that he almost cried out. After a while, he realized that something was wrong. Because he felt a pair of bulging little bare breasts on his back, and then gently rubbed against him. He could even feel the little cherry on top of them. With a soft cry, Sulan turned over and pulled the little maid into his arms. Looking at Angela's blushing little face, Sulan's heart warmed up, and he used his hand to gently hold her plump breasts. "She's a little girl." He carefully measured her breasts, and then went upstairs to check her body. Chapter 193. In the North Town City, Sulan had just guided a fountain out of the ground in a market with the help of the underground spring. The clear water rushed up 5 or 6 meters into the sky and turned into countless water droplets. Under the sunlight, the water droplets reflected colorful colors. It was very beautiful. "I'll leave the maintenance of this fountain to you. Don't be careless. It's used to put out fires in the market nearby." Sulan washed the mud on his hands with water, and then said to a manager of a market square next to him, "Don't worry, my lord. We'll definitely protect this fountain." After hearing the function of the fountain, the market leaders became more serious. In this era, fire was very serious. It was related to their lives. These people would naturally pay more attention to it. "My lord, Lord Aiden is back." A guard hurriedly ran to report. "Aiden is back? Did something happen?" Sulan had a bad feeling. Aiden had been monitoring the movements of the large tribes around the territory. It had only been 3 days since the last report. Did something happen? Since the last time the orcs sent a division to attack North Town City, Sulan had increased the collection of information from the surrounding tribes. However, since the orcs retreated, the other tribes had been resting and didn't find any big movements. Now that Aiden suddenly came back, the situation had obviously changed. "Let's go back." Sulan turned around and rode back to the Lord's castle. Sulan rode back to the Lord's castle and went straight to the study. After waiting for a while, hurried footsteps sounded. Aiden's travel-worn figure appeared in front of Sulan. He bowed slightly and said in a deep voice, "My lord, the Centaur tribe has lost. The orcs have won a decisive victory." "What did you say?" Crack. A crisp sound rang out. Sulan was shocked when he heard the news. He didn't control the strength in his hand and directly pressed a hole in the table. The high-quality teak furniture was directly destroyed. "How is this possible? Didn't you say that everything was normal 3 days ago? How could the Centaur tribe be defeated in just 3 days?" Sulan asked in disbelief. "Even if it's a sneak attack, with the strength of the centaurs, they won't be able to last for 3 days. Sulan knew how strong the Centaur tribe was. Although they didn't have as many people as the Orc tribe, they still had around 8,000 people. Moreover, the centaur tribe could be said to be all soldiers. A tribe of 8,000 people could bring out 6,000 soldiers. In addition, the centaurs were good at running and had sharp arrows. Even if the beast men had twice the numbers of the centaurs, they wouldn't have the slightest advantage. Moreover, 2 months ago, the centaurs had just defeated the beast men. The beast men had suffered heavy casualties. How could the centaurs be defeated in the blink of an eye? Although he knew the consequences of the centaur tribe's defeat, this defeat was too sudden. On the battlefield, as cavalry, even if the centaurs lost, the beast men wouldn't be able to catch up with them. How could this happen? In 3 days, no, it should be 2 days, the beast men had defeated the centaur tribe. According to this momentum, the beastmen's next target was likely to be the northern battlefront city. As the only city in this wasteland that could threaten them, Sulan didn't think that the beast men would be friendly with them. Do you know why? Sulan quickly calmed down. The centaurs had been defeated. It was too late to say anything now. The most important thing was to find out how the beast men won and then take corresponding precautions. My apologies, sir. The battle happened at night. We didn't see it. The centaurs were already defeated the next day. Aiden said awkwardly. Continue to monitor the beastmen's movements. Then send someone to contact the centaurs and ask them what happened that night. Sulan said with his eyes closed. Yes, sir. Aiden didn't even have time to eat before he hurriedly rode out of the northern battlefront city to continue monitoring the beastmen tribe. 2 days later, more centaurs were defeated. Sulan had a direct understanding of their losses. Many of the centaur tribe's males had died in battle. The centaur tribe had lost a large number of people and had no choice but to gather the scattered tribes to form a new defensive force. After being exterminated by the beast men, the centaur tribe gathered the remaining tribes and began to move south. Year 1687 of the Radiant Moon calendar, early April. Just as the northern battlefront city was making preparations for war, the first batch of centaurs to move south arrived on the other side of the Whitewater River. Across the Whitewater River, about 100 kilometers away from the northern battlefront city, was the centaur tribe's nomadic territory. After the migration, the centaurs began to chase away the goblins and other creatures nearby. After the Leaping Horse Plains were taken over by the beast men, the centaur tribe had no choice but to move southwest. The northern battlefront city living on the other side of the Whitewater River also felt an external pressure. The centaurs' westward migration had a chain effect. The balance between the two factions was broken in an instant. Firstly, the humans living in the northern battlefront city were nervous. Secondly, the other tribes living nearby were also on alert. Large numbers of goblins, kobolds, and gnolls were chased away, causing the wastelands to become even more chaotic. Even the number of monsters near the northern battlefront city had greatly increased. Sulan only sent people to monitor the centaur tribe. He didn't show any hostility. Perhaps when the beastmen army arrived, he would need their help. In fact, the centaur tribe wasn't easy to deal with. Sulan had relied on Owen's merchant group to make a deal with the centaurs. Under most circumstances, the centaurs preferred to rob. These centaurs were proficient in bows and arrows and were famous for their speed in the northern wastelands. No matter who it was, they would rob them. The centaur tribe's civilization wasn't very developed. Their forging skills were very limited, and the weapons and equipment they made were not as good as the humans. After the war with the beast men, the centaurs finally thought of trading with other tribes in exchange for military resources. However, at this time, no other tribe believed them. This directly caused them to lack all kinds of resources. In the end, Owen's merchant group took a risk and successfully made a deal with the centaur tribe. With the resources provided by the humans, the centaurs were in a stalemate with the beast men. They even had the upper hand. A few years later, the beast men merged with another tribe and their population increased greatly. Only then did they suppress the centaur tribe. With such a powerful enemy, the centaurs could no longer plunder other races without any scruples. They were afraid that they would attract more enemies. After the defeat of the leaping horse grass, not only did the centaur tribe's population decrease, but their resources also became scarce. Recently, they didn't even have enough food to eat. After settling down the tribe, the centaurs once again sent a messenger to the northern town. The messenger sent by the Samar centaur tribe was the Little Mare mission. On the other side, Aiden discovered that the beastmen army had become restless after a short period of rest. They began to train the recruited soldiers on a large scale. They let them familiarize themselves with the weapons, the commands of the army, and how to cooperate with others. At the same time, they began to prepare food. Obviously, they had begun to prepare for the upcoming war. When the centaurs' envoys arrived at the northern town, many of them were injured. This made Sulen feel a little strange. Even if the centaurs had declined, ordinary tribes wouldn't dare to make a move against them. Now, these people obviously came here after a battle. As for who would intercept the centaurs' envoys, there was no need to think about it. It must be the beastmen. The wolf riders of the beastmen's vanguard army had already arrived near the northern town. These beastmen tribes from the northeast would directly threaten the safety of the northern town. When he saw Mission again, she looked a little haggard. It seemed that the big defeat had a big impact on her. However, she also had a more capable aura. Obviously, she had grown a lot during this time. Good day, respected Sir Sulen. After meeting, the beautiful Little Mare Mission gave Sulen a warm hug. Good day, Mission, I deeply regret your experience. Feeling the amazing elasticity, Sulen said with a smile. Sir Sulen, we haven't seen each other for only a few months, and your territory has changed so much. Mission looked at the high walls of the northern town and said. When we first came here, it was still a remote town. The population was less than 2,000. Now it is a city with nearly 10,000 people. I heard that you had a big battle with the beastmen army a while ago. And you won? It was just a fluke. Sulen waved his hand and said. This time, it was an official war between the northern town and the centaur tribe. It was not just about trade. So this time, other than calculating, what else could they do? A few other leaders of the northern town also came. Among them were the high priest and General Leo Daly. Milwan was wearing a pure white robe with a beautiful leaf pattern on it. This was clearly not something that could be made with the centaur's craftsmanship. When Sullen's eyes fell on the beautiful little mare's chest, he was stunned. This lass's chest was towering. She really had a lot of assets. With a sigh, Sulen welcomed the centaur delegation into the Lord's castle. Most of the residents of the northern town had never seen a centaur before. It was the first time they saw this mythical creature. This time, the centaur delegation was much bigger than the first time. There were more than 60 strong centaur warriors. This gave Sulen a slight headache when arranging them. P.S. A book, Cultivation begins in the desert. Mortal cultivation, farming, no system, more than 2 million words. Chapter 194. Sulen asked after they sat down in the living room, Mission, I remember that you were almost as strong as the orcs. How did you lose so suddenly? Mission smiled bitterly, we were too careless. After defeating the orc army, we relaxed our vigilance. The orcs also retreated after that defeat, which made our warriors even more proud. Now that I think about it, they did that to numb us and make us reveal our flaws. Obviously, they succeeded. But even if you were careless, you wouldn't have been defeated so easily, Sulen said strangely. Indeed, even if we were careless, we wouldn't have lost so much. After all, even if we couldn't win, we could still run. It's just that the orcs were already prepared. The orc shamans used the blur spell, and the orc army used the blur spell to successfully surround our tribe under the cover of the night. Sulen nodded. He understood the orcs' plan. Blur was not a difficult spell. After using it, it could cover the user with a layer of shadow. With the cover of night, it was comparable to an invisibility spell. It was not easy to cover the entire orc army with blur. Even a legendary wizard would need to use a large amount of mana to cast it more than 10 times. Although the orc shamans were powerful, they had not reached the legendary level. Blur combined with the cover of night could barely achieve the effect of invisibility. Blur also had the effect of creating shadows that could easily make archers miss their target. After the centaurs became careless, the orcs rushed through the night and surrounded the centaur tribe. The centaurs' strength lay in their cavalry and heavy cavalry. After losing their speed and being close to the orcs, the centaurs lost all their advantages. The orc army formed an elite force. There were not many of them, only 2,000 of them. Together with the orc wolf riders, they directly broke through the centaur tribe's defense. The centaur tribe was defeated. In order to break out of the encirclement, the centaur tribe paid a huge price. Some of the warriors launched a suicide attack against the orc army. They used their flesh and blood to open a path for the women and children of the centaurs. In the end, the centaurs lost more than 3,000 elite warriors and some women and children. In the end, less than 4,000 centaurs successfully escaped. Even so, the centaurs were still being harassed by the orcs' wolf riders. The centaur tribe, which had suffered heavy losses, only stopped when they reached the north town city. They could no longer fend off the orc army on their own. The centaurs wanted to team up with the humans of the north town city to fight against the orc army. The war in the wilderness was very cruel. Once they lost, there would be the danger of extinction. The beast men would not give the centaurs a chance to rise again. Are you going to form an alliance with us? Sulen looked at the little mare and asked. That's right, Sir Sulen. The humans and the beast men have been enemies for generations. We also have a huge grudge against the beast men. We should work together to deal with the beast men. Moreover, after the orcs defeated our centaurs, their strength is not something that either of us can deal with alone. I don't deny that. Sulen nodded. The orcs are indeed our common enemy. We agree to form an alliance with the centaur tribe. When the centaurs heard that Sulen was willing to form an alliance, they were overjoyed. This was the best news they had heard since their defeat that night. Sir Sulen, we have another request. Mihian hesitated a bit and said. What request? We need the North Town City to give us some food, tents, medicine, and weapons. When the centaurs escaped that night, they did not bring any food. Many of them did not even have weapons. Sulen held his chin with one hand. Chris, how much food and tents can our territory provide? Master, the territory just had a harvest of food. After deducting our own needs and the food for the new population every month, we can provide 30 tons of food, Chris said. Sulen knew that this was only a small portion. She was just putting on a show for the centaurs. Immediately send 30 tons of food to the centaurs, Sulen said directly. Understood. Thank you for your generosity, Sir Sulen. You are the centaur's best friend, Mihian said gratefully. This is our support for our allies, Sulen said with a smile. Suluan said with a smile, but we are also very limited in weapons and equipment, so we can't provide you with too much. Sulen's territory was not big. The weapons and equipment he had were barely enough to support his army. He had 1,700 soldiers in his territory, and many of them were still wearing leather armor. The equipment he could provide was limited. Moreover, there was another reason. After all, they were only allies, and the centaurs weren't harmless. If they gave them too much equipment, what would they do if the centaurs turned around and attacked them? That wasn't impossible. If they stole a lot of equipment from northern town city and continued south, the orcs wouldn't chase after them. There weren't many rules in the wastelands. They believed in the survival of the fittest and the survival of the fittest. If Northgard City was still the same as Northgard Fortress, without a tall wall, the centaurs might not be looking for an alliance. They might just run away and steal the spoils. 30 tons of rations sounded like a lot, but because there were only potatoes and no other meat to supplement their diet, according to the centaur's appetite, a centaur would consume 2 to 3 kilograms a day. It must be known that a centaur would consume 5 to 6 kilograms of hay and 2 kilograms of fodder in a day. The centaur's appetite was even more astonishing. 30 tons of food, along with their own hunting, was enough to feed the 3,000 centaurs for half a month. If they wanted to rely on this amount of food to continue running, they wouldn't be able to last much longer. With the orcs chasing after them, the centaurs would most likely all starve to death. Sulen was vigilant against any forces. Even if they were allies, he would use the most malicious method. Murder was always happening in this world. The centaurs lacked weapons, but they had bows and arrows. What the centaurs lacked was armor. In the battle that night, they did not have time to put on armor. This caused the centaurs to lack heavy cavalry. Although heavy cavalry was slow, they could not change directions, cost a lot of money, and had many other shortcomings, they were still irreplaceable on a cold weapon battlefield. If the centaur tribe had 1,000, no, 500 heavy cavalry, they could easily cut through the orc tribe's army on the battlefield. Sulen gave the centaurs 300 sets of armor inlaid with iron scales, as well as a batch of javelins and spears. Together with 30 tons of food, they were sent to the centaurs. At the same time, northern Battlefront City entered a state of emergency. 1,700 soldiers were all back in the army. 200 North Battlefront Castle guards were on standby. 2,000 militia members were gathered again. The blacksmith shop also started producing armor. Su Luan intended to equip all the soldiers above the level of elite spearmen with iron armor. The strength of elite spearmen was still a little lower than that of knights, but after being equipped with good iron armor and weapons, ordinary orcs were no match for them. Now, most of the long spear soldiers in North Town City had reached this level. Some of them had even reached the level of heavy armor long spear soldiers, knight level. The heavy armored pikemen were the backbone of the army, so they were equipped with the best equipment. The half-body plate armor forged by the blacksmiths in the territory was given to the heavy armored pikemen first. At the same time, the tower shields made from enkegs were all given to them. The barbarians also used half-body plate armor and were given double-edged great axes and hand axes. These people could only use them to charge or disrupt the enemy's formation. The archers were all equipped with iron scale armor and longbows. At the same time, they were also equipped with melee weapons. Only a portion of these archers used centaur longbows and elven war bows. The rest of the archers used ordinary birch bows. The birch bow's range was half as long as the elven and centaur longbows. Sulen originally wanted to replace all the archers with centaur longbows and elven battle bows, but the oak wood used for elven battle bows wasn't mature yet, so he had to replace it with birch. Although the birch bow's range was short and its power was low, it also consumed less energy. Although it wasn't much of a threat to the armored orcs, the normal orc soldiers didn't have any armor, so the birch bow was still a threat to them. Sulen issued a call for war in the North Town City. There were still many mercenaries in the North Town City, and they were all recruited into the army. The half-elves were also in the range of recruitment. Last time, Su Luan promised Grace that he would only recruit 150 half-elves to join the army, but he could continue to recruit when the territory faced a great threat. So this time, a total of 350 half-elves joined the army, and the same was true for the drows. In order to deal with the incoming orc army, Sulen had mobilized all the forces in the territory. But even so, there were only 2,500 soldiers in the North Town City other than the militia. All of the scouts had been sent out. Every 3 hours, there would be a scout reporting the latest movements of the orc army. The orc army had over 10,000 soldiers this time. Among them, there were about 500 elite orc warriors, 3,000 orc wolf riders, and 8,000 orc warriors. In addition, there were more than 5,000 servants in the orc army. After the orc army defeated the centaur tribe, a large number of gnolls, earth goblins, and bugbears joined the orc army. As for the normal goblins and kobolds, they didn't even have the right to join the army. The only ally of the North Town City was the centaur tribe. Chapter 195. On the third day after the centaurs left, they appeared at the White River. They were only about 10 kilometers away from the northern citadel. The total population of the northern citadel and the centaur tribe was only about 10,000 people. This number was about the same as the orc army, but most of them were civilians with no combat ability. Sulen also officially announced that the territory had entered a period of war. All commercial activities were stopped. The city was closed, the port was closed, and all kinds of resources were temporarily mobilized. All the merchant groups could choose to leave or stay to help the northern citadel. If they stayed, their guards and mercenaries would be conscripted into the army. Many of the merchants were so scared that their faces turned pale when they heard that the orc army was about to attack. They wanted to leave with their guards and mercenaries. For these people, they had no choice but to leave. Sulen didn't make it difficult for them. He just recorded their merchant groups. In the future, these merchant groups wouldn't receive any preferential treatment when they came to the northern citadel. Their specialties like sugar, rum, dragon tiger wine, and vodka, brewed with potatoes, would no longer be available to them. At the same time, Sulen also recorded the merchant groups that were willing to stay. The guards and mercenaries of these merchant groups would join the army. Sulen would give these people more preferential treatment. In times of crisis, those who were willing to stand with the northern citadel, no matter what their intentions were, had helped him after all. As soon as the order was given, the merchant groups immediately packed up and left. Of course, there were also some who were willing to fight and let their guards and mercenaries join the army of the northern citadel. This battle also showed Sulen who was a friend, who was a passerby, and who was trustworthy in times of crisis. A fast horse galloped from the northeast. It passed through the city gate and rushed directly to the lord's castle. The figure jumped off the horse and hurried into the castle. There were hurried footsteps in the corridor. Soon, a guard's voice sounded outside the door, "Sir, an urgent report from the scouting team." "Come in." The guard came in with a drow. "Sir, Captain Aiton sent me back to report that the orc army is moving toward us." "Captain Aiton is still there watching. Thank you for your hard work." "How far is the orc army? How many people do they have?" Sulen stood up and asked. "When I left, the orc army was still 200 kilometers away from North Town City. According to their speed, they are at most 180 kilometers away from us. They have at least 10,000 men and 5,000 servants. 1,000 wolf riders will be the vanguard," the drow said clearly. "The enemy is at the gate." Sulen nodded. The range of the strategic map only covered the area where his territory was located. Only those beastmen who entered his territory could see it. "Go and rest." Sulen waved his hand and dismissed them. Then he said to the guards, "Order the army to get ready for battle. Get ready to fight at any time. Northern Battlefront City is under military management. All resources will be distributed. The security forces are patrolling 24 hours a day to prevent anyone from taking the opportunity to cause trouble. All markets will be closed and a curfew will be imposed. No one is allowed to enter or leave without orders." The attendant beside him replied loudly, "Understood." Soon, the entire northern battlefront city began to operate like a sophisticated machine. The battle that was about to begin could be the most difficult one northern battlefront city had ever faced. Tens of thousands of orcs were about to arrive. Sulan did not plan to let them come so easily. If the orcs surrounded the city, northern battlefront city would be able to hold them back. What if the centaurs retreated? Therefore, he planned to fight at Whitewater River or Red Sand River, relying on the river to defend. Attacking halfway was a well-tested tactic. Although it was simple, it was useful. As for fighting with one's back to the river, it was not something normal people could do. If it was used well, it could stimulate the morale of the soldiers and allow them to fight to the death. However, if it was not used well, it would become a dead end. It was not something normal people could do. Outside northern battlefront city, 2,500 soldiers of northern battlefront city lined up neatly. Sulan led Chris, Hathaway, Karina, Boulder, and Johnson at the front. Grace and Harrison stayed behind to guard northern battlefront city. Aiden led the reconnaissance team to monitor the orcs' movements. The centaurs had also finished gathering. However, after the disastrous defeat, the centaurs had gathered all they could. There were only 2,000 of them, and some of them were female centaurs. Two teams of barbarian warriors stood on the left and right. They would be the assault force of northern battlefront city. They would tear down the enemy's defense when the machine was turned off. Two teams of half-elf archers stood on the outside. They were Sullen's guards. A low horn was blown, and the flags that were flying high in the air were fluttering in the wind. Sulan mounted his horse and knocked on its belly. The big black horse took a few steps forward. Clang! Sulan unsheathed his sword and looked around. Soldiers, we've been through a lot to come to this barren land. We drove away the gnomes and kobolds, drove away the gnolls, defeated the ogres, killed the trolls, and wiped out the orcs. Only then did we truly take over this land. But today, the orcs are here again. They want to take over this land. They want to enslave and kill us. Now tell me, what are you going to do? Sulan roared. Fight to the death. Fight to the death. Fight to the death. Roars shook the sky. All the soldiers raised their weapons and roared to the sky. Their fighting spirit soared through the clouds. Their voices spread everywhere. Even the centaur army a few kilometers away by the Whitewater River was stirred up. Sulan pulled the reins, and his horse reared. The army quieted down again. Today, the orcs have more than 10,000, and we only have 2,500. They're 4 times our number, but I'm not afraid at all. If victory is decided by numbers, then who can beat the kobolds and gnomes? Quality is more important than quantity. I, Sulan. I led 35 barbarians to start this business, and I'm invincible. Why? Because as long as I, Sulan, am alive, I'm invincible. Sulan roared. Invincible. 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 All the soldiers in the North City roared in unison. Their voices pierced through the clouds and rocks. Let's go. Sulan pointed his sword and roared, let those green-skinned bastards know that attacking here is the biggest mistake of their lives. Neat footsteps sounded, and the army slowly moved out. 800 mounted infantry guarded the flanks, and the rest of the soldiers moved forward slowly. At the back of the army, 80 ballistas were placed on a dozen carriages. The army moved east along the Red Sand River. Sulan planned to stop the orc army at the bank of the Baishui River. After the Baishui River flowed eastward past the mine, the water flow slowed down. This was the easiest place to cross the river. According to the news sent back by the reconnaissance camp, the orc army was advancing in this direction. At this time, they were less than 50 miles away. On the other side of the river, a large number of orc wolf riders were patrolling. They were closely monitoring the movements of Sulan's army. The sun was shining brightly. Sulan had ordered the army to set up camp. The orc army was very willing to send out soldiers to test the waters. If the North City was defeated, they would cross the river. If they couldn't, they would set up camp and rest for a day before fighting the humans. After knowing that the North City's army had set up camp again, the orc army didn't change their direction. Instead, they headed straight here. It was obvious that the orcs had decided to completely defeat the North City's army here. To the orcs, this was a very good opportunity. They weren't good at sieges. If they could wipe out the human army here, then the North City would be within their reach. Therefore, after discovering the human army, they didn't avoid it. Instead, they headed straight here. In the afternoon, the construction of the camp in North Town City was completed. The cooks had already started cooking. The army was in good order. It was at this moment that a group of orcs separated from the main army. They were carrying a large number of wooden rafts towards the Whitewater River. The scouts who were monitoring the orcs' movements by the river immediately noticed the orcs' movements. They quickly sent out a warning. Sulen immediately led 2 squads of spearmen and 2 squads of archers out of the camp. The orc soldiers carried the wooden rafts and rushed towards the river. These orcs were the same as the ones Yi Shiwen had seen before. They were tall and strong. Their faces were ferocious, and they had a pair of long canine teeth. They wore leather armor and had all kinds of weapons. Most of them had spiked maces and giant axes. Many of them were also carrying simple wooden shields. The formation of these soldiers was messy, but there was a strong aura coming from them. If Yi Shiwen was a coward, he would probably turn around and run. The soldiers behind Sulen remained silent. Their eyes were fixed on the orcs on the other side of the river. The archers on the side had already knocked their arrows. As soon as Sulen gave the order, these archers would shoot out their arrows. Charge! With a roar, the green-skinned orcs rushed to the river and threw the rafts in their hands into the water. Then, several people rushed up. The rafts had limited space. Each raft could only fit 4 or 5 people. These orcs held up their shields and quickly paddled to the other side of the river. The Whitewater River was about 80 meters wide. If they were on the ground, these orcs would be able to cross such a short distance in a single charge. Now that they were on the river, although their speed had decreased a lot, they were still paddling very quickly. Soon, the orcs reached the center of the river. Sulen gently waved his hand and cold arrows locked onto them. At the same time, the spearmen on the river had already gotten into formation and were waiting for the orcs. Fire! Sulen coldly looked at the orc army from the river. He waved his long sword and the arrows that he had prepared beforehand shot towards the orcs on the river. Chapter 196. Charge! The leading orc commander immediately gave the order to charge when he saw the large number of archers shooting from the bank. They had already expected this before the battle began, so they had no choice but to raise their shields and charge forward. The army on the other side of the river didn't seem to have a lot of people. As long as they charged forward, they were confident they could defeat the army in front of them first. Archers, 3 volleys. Beside the White River, the half-elf Captain Ron's eyes flashed with excitement when he saw the orcs charging forward. He gave the order, and all the archers quickly lined up in 3 rows. The first row quickly retreated after firing their arrows, followed by the second and third rows. The first row was ready to fire again. Compared to the human army that used archers to cover fire, they didn't care about accuracy and focused more on coverage. The North Town City archers focused more on accuracy. With a large number of half-elf archers, the accuracy of the North Town City archers was terrifying, especially when it came to 3 volleys like this. The elven war bows and centaur longbows had a long range and were extremely powerful. The White River was less than 100 meters wide. At such a close distance, the arrows could easily pierce through the wooden shields made by the orcs and continue to shoot through their bodies. The orcs kept falling under the rain of arrows. Many of them directly fell into the river, and the river was soon dyed red. The orcs began to fight back. Many of them picked up their bows and began to shoot at the North Town City army. However, since they were standing on the wooden rafts, they couldn't stand steadily, so the power and accuracy of the arrows were greatly reduced. These orcs that were shooting with bows quickly became the priority targets of the archers. They were soon turned into hedgehogs by the arrows. Many orcs on the wooden rafts were falling into the water after being hit by the arrows. However, these orcs continued to charge forward under the lead of the orc commanders. The endless rain of arrows was like an invisible line of defense. The orcs fearlessly ran into the impenetrable line of death. The flood of orcs fearlessly charged into the line of defense. Blood-red waves bloomed all of a sudden. Cold arrows fell from the sky and pierced through the bodies of the charging orcs. The wooden shield had completely lost its defensive effect. Be it centaur longbows or elven war bows, they could be easily pierced through. Even if he was wearing metal armor, the arrows would still be able to enter through the gaps. Blood splattered everywhere and dyed the surface of the river red. At this moment, life was being harvested like grass. After paying a huge price, the orcs were finally 20 meters away from the shore. These orcs jumped over 5 to 6 meters into the water and continued to swim towards the shore. At this time, the river water had already reached their waists. A distance of 10 meters would only take a breath on land, but in the water, their speed was greatly limited. Many of the orcs were shot to death before they could even reach the shore. The orcs behind them began to throw their javelins. Although they weren't very stable, they were still very lethal. The longbowmen retreated one after another, and the elite spearmen, who had been waiting at the side, quickly stepped forward. The orcs that had just reached the shore angrily rushed forward. The sharp blades in their hands slashed at the spearmen's shields. A deep mark was left on the ironclad wooden shield. What surprised him was that the human soldier only took half a step back and stabilized himself. The spear in his hand instantly shot out like a poisonous snake. The orc warrior didn't have time to dodge at all. The spear instantly pierced through the leather armor and into his abdomen. There weren't so many complicated changes on the battlefield. Under normal circumstances, it was a killing move. Life and death were often decided at the moment of contact. During normal training, the spearmen only had one move to attack, and that was to stab. Over the years, they had already practiced this move to the point of perfection. The orc only felt a sharp pain in his abdomen. He couldn't help but take 2 steps back. Blood kept gushing out of the wound. But before he could react, a spear beside him instantly pierced through his throat. At this time, at the bank of the White Water River, the elite spearmen with shields and spears had already formed battle groups of 3. They were constantly killing the orcs that had rushed to the shore. These orcs were horrified to find that the weak and malnourished humans in their impression weren't killed like vegetables. Instead, the orcs were being defeated by their attacks. Relying on the advantage of their equipment, these human soldiers cooperated with each other and quickly reaped the lives of the orc warriors. Even if there were a few orcs who didn't care about anything and fought with their lives, they could only seriously injure their opponents. When they wanted to take another step forward, they were killed by the warriors beside them. There weren't many orc soldiers that had rushed to the shore. In just a short while, more than half of the orc soldiers had died. When the orc commander on the other side saw this situation, he didn't continue to attack. After a few angry roars, the orcs began to retreat. After seeing the orcs' movement, Sulen gently waved his hand, and the longbowmen began to shoot. Shooting was the furthest way to shoot arrows. Now, the entire river was covered by the arrows. Those orcs who didn't make it to the shore in time were shot to death by the arrows that fell from the sky. The orcs on the shore had no more reinforcements, and their retreat was cut off. Knowing that they were going to die, the orcs crazily counterattacked the human soldiers. Seeing this situation, the elite spearmen who didn't want to fight the orcs formed a shield wall. Then, they surrounded the orcs and killed them one by one. Soon, the battle by the river was over. The orcs on the river had paid a heavy price and finally retreated to the shore. Only the corpses of the orcs on the shore and the wooden rafts floating on the river were left to tell the story of the fierce battle just now. After the initial probing battle, this group of orcs had stopped underestimating the humans. Although there weren't many humans in front of them, with the help of the terrain, it wouldn't be easy for the orc army to cross the river. Let's go back. The orcs on the other side of the river looked deeply at Su Len, and then led the orcs back to the camp. Ding! Congratulations to the host. Under your command, the Northern Battlefront City Army has obtained a great victory. The battle has ended. You have received 8,360 experience points. The battle has ended. You have received a gold treasure chest. You have received 2 tungsten steel ingots. Su Len first cast physical healing on the injured and the unfortunate ones. He also collected the corpses of the unfortunate ones. He left some people to clean up the battlefield and monitor the orc army on the other side. Su Len brought the others back to the camp. Zhang Tai opened the strategic map. After leaving the territory, the vision range of the strategic map was 20 kilometers around Su Luan. The most conspicuous thing on the map was the large red light spot on the other side of the Baishui River. The Centaur army wasn't close to here. Su Len could only see a few yellow dots on the edge of the map that represented allies. According to the agreement between both sides, the Centaur army would suddenly attack the orc army during the final battle. Now, they needed to hide. With the strategic map, the battlefield could be said to be completely transparent to Su Len. Every move of the orcs was under his surveillance. Other than the orc army in front of him, Su Len also discovered that there was another orc army hidden in the forest nearby. Looking at the size, there were about 2,000 orcs. It was obvious that the orcs hadn't revealed their full strength. After keeping the system in alert mode, Su Len opened his inventory and checked his rewards. The northern battlefront city had lost 2 people in this battle. One was pierced through the heart by a javelin, and the other had his neck cut off by an orc. However, that orc's heart was pierced through as well. There were more than 10 orcs who were heavily injured. There were more than 30 orcs who were lightly injured. There were about 300 orcs who were killed. Most of them were killed by archers. The experience points weren't enough to level up. Su Len opened the treasure chest in his inventory. There was a flash of light and a system notification sounded in his ears. Congratulations to the host. You have received the talent, Iron Bones. Iron Bones, after cruel training, your resistance to attacks has increased. All attacks that deal damage to you will be reduced by 10%. Normal weapons are ineffective against you. The Iron Bones talent was quite good. It could reduce damage. With this talent, Sullen's defense had increased again. Normal attacks were ineffective against him. After moving his body, Su Len took out the tungsten steel that he had just received. This steel ingot was cold to the touch. It wasn't heavy, and its color was close to silver. There were many naturally formed patterns on it. This item was considered a high-end material in the game. Wearing it would increase one's attributes. Tungsten steel, a metal with magical power. High-level forging material. After wearing it, it can increase spirit by 3 points, the effect will disappear when the spirit exceeds 30 points. It also has a mana recovery effect, recovering 1% of energy every minute. This item was definitely good for mages. Not only could it increase spirit, but it could also recover energy. There was no weave in this world. If one wanted to cast spells, they had to rely on their own mana. It was very difficult to become a mage. Therefore, mana recovery was a very important issue. This tungsten steel could recover 1% of its energy every minute. Although it wasn't much, it could recover 90% of its energy in an hour and a half. Of the 2 tungsten steel ingots, Sulan took one for himself and prepared to give the other to Hathaway. As the only mage in the territory, it was best to give this item to her. After putting away the items, Sulan went to Hathaway's tent and handed one of the tungsten steel ingots to her. "What kind of metal is this? I feel that my spirit has increased a lot, and my mana recovery has also sped up." Feeling the benefits of the tungsten steel, Hathaway asked in surprise. "This is tungsten steel, a high-level metal material. This piece is for you." Sulan smiled and said, "Of course, you can also try to study this metal material and see if you can make magic equipment with it. I'll try my best. I've never seen this metal before. I won't touch it easily if I'm not 100% sure." Hathaway looked at the tungsten steel in her hand with shining eyes. The leader of the beastmen sat down again and took the wineskin from a strong beastman warrior beside him. He took a big gulp and passed the wineskin to another beastman. In the dark forest, a group of orcs arrived. "Great shaman. Is everything ready?" "Ready." "Then let's begin." With a slight magic fluctuation, an invisible shadow shrouded these orcs. As the shadow spread, the figures of the orcs in the shadow became abnormally blurry. These shadows quickly stopped expanding, and the shaman continued to cast spells. About 10 minutes later, the 2,000 orcs were all shrouded in shadows. With the cover of the night, these orcs seemed to be invisible from afar. The orcs didn't cross the river from the spot during the day. Instead, they continued to move downstream for another kilometer. They planned to cross the river from here. Warning! Warning! A large number of enemies have begun to move. Warning! Warning! A large number of enemies have begun to move. Su Luan was suddenly awakened by the alarm in his mind. He opened the strategic map and saw that the orcs hiding in the woods were moving downstream of the Whitewater River. Obviously, these orcs were planning to cross the river downstream. Seeing this, Sulan immediately got up and sent someone to inform everyone to gather immediately. It took 15 minutes for all the soldiers to gather. After seeing all the soldiers gathered, Sulan took out the sky illumination lamp and activated the ability of this item. Group Invisibility. A glass-like item quickly spread out from Sulan's hand. The glass cover quickly covered the entire army in the camp. By the time everyone was shrouded in, the camp had become empty from the outside. Everyone, march silently. At Su Luan's order, the whole army of the north town quietly moved downstream of the Baishui River like horses and hooves. More than 2,000 people were all enchanted with invisibility. The orc scouts on the opposite side didn't notice anything strange. The distance of 1 kilometer wasn't close, but it wasn't far either. Soon, the northern battlefront city army arrived at the river where the orcs were crossing. The night was hazy. Water vapor rose from the river. A fog began to spread on the river. The orcs who were enchanted with invisibility were even more difficult to distinguish. The night had completely covered their bodies. If it wasn't for the map showing them, Sulan would have overlooked them. Although the orcs' method wasn't very clever, it was good as long as it was effective. The 2,000 orcs rowed their wooden rafts across the river. Sulan didn't immediately attack. Instead, he waited for more orcs to cross the river. He already planned to use this opportunity to wipe out the entire orc army in front of him. All the spearmen were lined up at the front. These spearmen formed a huge spear formation. The archers followed closely behind the spear formation. At the front of the spear formation were the elite spearmen. These spearmen were all wearing heavy armor, holding a large shield in one hand and a spear in the other. The spears were like a forest, the shields were like a wall. The spear formation was like a wall. As long as Sulan gave the order, they would directly push forward. On both sides of the spearmen were 30 ballistae. The ballistae were diagonally facing the orc army. There was a huge killing weapon hanging on each of the ballistae. 3-meter-long spears were mounted on the ballistae. If these things were fired at such a close distance, it was very likely that a few orcs would be hanging on each spear. All the archers were ready. Sulen stared at the red dots on the map. Soon, 1/3 of the orcs had reached the shore. The rest were quickly approaching the river. Sulen's eyes were cold. He took out the sky lamp and directly used its other function. Break invisibility. An invisible energy wave swept forward in a fan shape with Su Luan as the center. The energy wave was very fast, and in just one breath, the haze on the orc army on the shore and the orc army on the river was instantly dispelled. All the orcs were instantly exposed to the orcs in front of the orcs. The orcs all looked ferocious and murderous. They were all wearing heavy armor. There were about 500 to 600 orcs in iron armor. It didn't take a genius to know that these orcs were the most elite warriors of the Fireblade clan. If these elite warriors were wiped out, it would definitely be good news for Northtown City. Longbowmen, get ready. Sulen raised his right hand. More than 700 longbowmen immediately knocked their arrows. They were only 50 meters away from the orcs, but these 50 meters formed 4 defensive lines. It wouldn't be easy for the orcs to break through. Ballistae, get ready. Fire. With Sulen's order, the prepared ballistae immediately fired. At the same time, all the longbowmen also fired. Boom! The beastmen soldiers crowding the shore were cut down like wheat, but the most shocking thing was the crossbow bolts fired by the 60 ballistae. The 3-meter-long bolts were like the scariest messengers of death. Like a stick of candied haws, the spears pierced through the first orc and continued forward, piercing through the orcs behind it. The 60 ballistae fired at the same time. The orcs at the outermost perimeter suffered a great loss. With the addition of more than 700 longbowmen, the orcs on the shore suffered heavy casualties. The range of the ballistae was 400 to 500 meters. Sulen waited until they were 200 meters away before announcing the attack. He wanted to unleash the full power of the ballistae. After the attack, everyone's invisibility effect disappeared. The spear formation advanced toward the shore in an orderly manner. The orcs were stunned by the sudden attack. But when they saw the orcs from the northern city, they immediately charged forward. Longbowmen, get ready. Fire in 3 straight sections. The endless rain of bolts kept coming. Large numbers of orcs died. At the same time, many orcs continued to charge toward the northern city's army. However, although these orcs were quite strong, they were facing a shield wall that had already been set up. Javelins and axes were thrown at them. The shields made a lot of noise. Then, some orcs with maces and axes smashed at the shields. The powerful force made the shields tremble. The spears on the side were like poisonous snakes. They quickly stabbed and retracted. Large numbers of orcs were pierced and bled. The orcs on the shore suffered heavy casualties. But soon, a large number of new orcs joined in. They were the orcs that had just crossed the river. As soon as they came ashore, they immediately met up with the other orcs. As the elites of the orc army, although they were stunned by the previous attack, they quickly adjusted. After seeing that it was difficult to break through the front, large numbers of orcs took advantage of the time when the ballistae were loading the bolts. They braved the rain of bolts and charged toward the ballistae on both sides. However, to their disappointment, Sulen specifically transferred more than half of the barbarian guards to guard the ballistae to prevent this from happening. Those orcs who managed to charge through the rain of bolts were ready to kill. But they ran into the barbarian guards who were already ready to attack. Chapter 198. In the darkness, the orcs rushed forward. The barbarian warriors who had been waiting for a long time waved their giant axes and charged forward. Raise your morale. Group petrifying skin. Group haste. Group enchanted weapon. Owl's sight. Rays of magic light rose from the North Town City's army. With the buff from the spells, the army's strength was doubled. In addition, the Owl's insight was a weakened version of weakness insight, so the North Town City's army's lethality increased once again. Their defense, speed, and strength were all strengthened. Even their weapons were strengthened. The battle was intense from the start. The orc warriors who were surrounded had no choice but to fight to the death. Roar! The leader of the orc warriors was one of the few elites in iron armor. After a roar to the sky, he rushed towards Su Luan while brandishing his heavy axe. Su Luan didn't care about him at all. After all, anyone under the legendary level was nothing more than an ant. With a sweep of the violet dragon halberd, he was sent flying. Blood poured out of his mouth, mixed with chunks of his internal organs. His body was twisted into a strange position, and before he even landed on the ground, he was already dead. Orcs could be said to be the strongest of the middle-sized humanoid races. Trolls and ogres belonged to the giant race. In this world, intelligent life still abided by the law that the bigger the body, the stronger the strength. Barbarians were already the largest humanoid race, but in front of the orcs, they were still nothing. But these seemingly weak beastmen barbarians easily overturned the beastmen warriors. On a large-scale battlefield, the clash of strength was common. The orcs were the tyrants of the wilderness. They weren't weak. They didn't lack strength or bravery. They were born with the ability to survive with violence. The most common orc warrior could easily take down 3 to 5 fully armed human soldiers with their bare hands. They could even take on the charge of a warhorse with no problem. Back then, the humans were able to defeat the orcs not only because of their strategy, but also because of the help of the elves. Unfortunately, they had bitten off more than they could chew. The soldiers of Northern Citadel weren't weak. Moreover, their strength, equipment, techniques, logistics, and willpower were superior in every aspect. Moreover, they had the support of the adepts as well. This slight advantage accumulated into an insurmountable gap. Moreover, half of the orcs were still crossing the river. The fact that they didn't collapse while crossing the river was already a testament to their bravery. The current battle had turned into a fueling tactic. Perhaps there were miraculous spells in this world that could turn the situation around, but it obviously wouldn't be these orcs. Su Luan led Boulder, Johnson, and a team of barbarian great axe berserkers to launch a charge. These barbarians went berserk and turned into killing machines. Whirlwind Slash didn't stop for even a moment. Army Spirit plus Haste plus Enchanted Weapons plus Berserk plus Whirlwind Slash plus Owl Sight, these barbarians turned into windmills. Their killing efficiency was so high that it left people speechless. Everywhere they passed, corpses were strewn everywhere. In fact, the windmill of these barbarians was only a weaker version. The real windmill could only be used by legendary warriors. It required legendary endurance, legendary berserk, whirlwind slash, aura slash, weakness detection, advanced battle reflex, and legendary strength. Then, a mage would buff him with advanced haste, advanced enchanted weapons, advanced enemy prediction, advanced fox's grace, and other support skills. Once such a person appeared on the battlefield, he could turn the entire battlefield into a meat mill. There was an ultimate version of the windmill skill. If one were to ask which class had the highest attack power among all the physical classes, the answer would undoubtedly be the Sword Saint. The Sword Saint class was very special. They gave up all their armor and pursued the highest attack power. This made them the class with the lowest defense among all the physical classes, but at the same time, it gave them an attack power that other physical classes couldn't reach. Only the Sword Saint could make the strongest attack of the physical classes. With a series of skills such as Blade Storm, Aura Slash, Weakness Detection, Cleave, whirlwind slash, advanced haste, and enemy prediction, the Sword Saint could burst out a powerful force in an instant. It was said that in the era of the legendary Arcane Empire, those great arcanists drove the floating city and the Sword Saint to kill the gods, but this kind of thing had not been confirmed until now. Su Len casually pulled out a javelin, leaned back, and threw it toward the orc crowd in front of him. At such a close distance, the orc warrior didn't have any time to react. The javelin, which was more powerful than the arrows shot from the ballista, instantly disappeared into the crowd of orcs. The javelin penetrated the orcs in a straight line, and blood splattered everywhere. All the orcs in the path of the javelin were penetrated by the javelin, and a big bloody hole appeared on their bodies. Screams of pain could be heard endlessly. Charge! The army of the northern battlefront city began to advance. Under the leadership of Su Len, the human army advanced steadily. The orcs also launched a counterattack, not to be outdone. Both sides were trying their best to expand their lines of defense and kill each other with all their might. The orcs surged forward like a tide, and the army of the northern battlefront city was like an indestructible reef in the sea. The tide splashed a lot of waves, and then it suddenly shattered. The orc warriors were surprised to find that the humans, who could only hide behind the solid city walls in their eyes, were actually so powerful. In this kind of close combat, the orcs were the ones who suffered heavy casualties. If that was all, then the orcs could still hold on for a while. However, the arrows that came from the back of the humans were like a storm. In a short period of time, the longbowmen had already shot out 30 arrows. In this small area of the river bank, more than 20,000 arrows had completely covered the entire area. With every step Su Len took, he left behind countless broken limbs. The scarlet blood turned the river bank into a muddy pool. Facing the soldiers of the northern battlefront city, the orcs were at a disadvantage. However, in front of Su Len, every orc was a match for him. The orcs on the river bank found it harder and harder to hold on. The orcs on the river behind them sped up, trying to support them. The night wind whistled. Blood and slaughter. A thick smell of blood spread across the battlefield along with the wind. The battle had reached its climax. Soldiers from both sides were dying every second. Neither the orcs nor the northern battlefront city soldiers showed any signs of backing down. When enemies met on a narrow path, the courageous would win. In just a few minutes, the area where the two armies were fighting was covered with corpses. Dark red blood flowed into a small stream, flowing along the river bank into the river. The Whitewater River was dyed red. The first row of elite longbowmen suffered heavy casualties. The second row of elite longbowmen took over. The northern battlefront city's longbowman formation was still in good condition. If the second row of longbowmen suffered heavy casualties, the third row of longbowmen would take over. The archers at the back began to recover their strength. Shooting 30 arrows in a short time created a rain of arrows that blotted out the sky. It also caused the archers to be temporarily exhausted. This battle could be said to be the most difficult battle the orcs had ever fought. In the past, when they fought with other tribes, those tribes didn't have much leather armor. They also didn't know how to coordinate with each other. Under the assault of the orcs, their formations could be easily torn apart in a few charges. Then, they relied on their strong physique and weapons to slaughter the tribes. Even the centaurs, who had been fighting with them for years, were defeated when they got close to them. However, this group of humans was different from all the enemies they had faced before. They had sturdy armor, shields, and sharp weapons. What made them even more uncomfortable was that every time they attacked, they would feel like they were being besieged by several humans. Under the leadership of Su Len, the barbarian guards were invincible. The orcs suffered heavy casualties. After speeding up the boat, the orcs finally reached the shore. These orcs didn't wait for the wooden raft to reach the shore. Instead, they directly came over to help. However, their arrival didn't help the orcs turn the situation around. Seeing all the orcs rushing to the shore, Su Len revealed a smile. He was worried that the battle here was too fierce and scared the orcs away. In the end, he wasn't disappointed. The orcs sped up and rushed to the shore. "Since you're all here, then stay here." Su Len smiled. He didn't let Christina and Hathaway do anything. He wanted to trap all the orcs here and then make the final decision. At the same time, he didn't want to give the orc army on the other side time to react. He wanted to kill all the orcs that crossed the river to ambush the orcs. Fireball. Chain lightning. Exploding flame. Chain fireball. Pain whip. Ice storm. Hathaway, Karina, and Chrissy were on a small hill behind Northgard City. They had prepared a long time ago and cast all the spells they were going to cast. The narrow shore was filled with all kinds of elemental powers. Frost, lightning, and fire wreaked havoc in this area. The orcs that had just rushed to the shore and hadn't made contact with the northern city soldiers yet were drowned by the elemental powers. The flames melted the steel and ignited the beastmen's bodies. Lightning danced back and forth in the crowd of beastmen. All of the beastmen's bodies were charred black by the electricity. Pieces of ice blades suddenly appeared and spun rapidly. The sharp ice blades directly cut the beastmen's bodies into countless terrifying wounds. As soon as blood flowed out, it was frozen into ice. It wasn't just physical damage. These orcs felt like their brains were being stirred with a red-hot iron. Blood flowed out of their nostrils like water pipes. Even their eyes and ears were bleeding. In just a few breaths, the hundreds of orcs that had rushed to the shore and the hundreds of orcs before them were all wiped out. Chapter 199. The battlefield was silent. The soldiers of North City were also shocked by the series of explosions. The power of the spellcasters was not just for show. It was only 2 4th-level spellcasters and a 3rd-level spellcaster, but they were able to kill 1,000 orcs in a short period of time. Su Len had only seen this kind of scene in modern battlefields in the movies from his previous life. The smell of burnt flesh filled the air, accompanied by the thick smell of blood. It was nauseating. Other than the orcs, a few barbarians who rushed too quickly were also affected. Some of them were burnt black by the lightning, while others were burned quite badly by the flames. However, these barbarians were wearing dragon leather armor and had intermediate toughness. They had high resistance, so their injuries were not too serious. After the battle, Su Len arranged for people to help the injured soldiers and clean up the battlefield. He began to treat the seriously injured soldiers. The green light of the physical healing spell kept rising, and the green life energy merged with these seriously injured soldiers. Soon, these people recovered from their serious injuries to light injuries. Just as the soldiers of North City were cleaning up the battlefield, the orcs finally gathered their troops and moved towards the river. However, they were too late. From the beginning of the battle to the end, it lasted less than half an hour. With the orcs' ability to organize their troops in such a short period of time, it could be said that they were well trained. Of course, Su Luen was very clear about the organizational ability of the army in this world. Even the elite troops of the Kingdom of Florence could not assemble in 20 minutes. He successfully used this time difference to take down the elite troops that the orcs used for the sneak attack. After the orc army saw that the battle was over, they roared angrily and left with their troops. This surprised Su Len. He did not angrily order the soldiers to continue to cross the river. Su Len was ready to earn some experience, but he did not expect the orc commander to hold back. However, since they left, Su Len was not in a hurry to fight with them. In order to end the battle in a short period of time, the soldiers of North City had expended a lot of energy. Those longbowmen had basically used up all their strength in a short period of time. Now, they had only recovered 30% to 40% of their strength. The battlefield was quickly cleaned up. Su Len left the scouts behind to continue monitoring the situation, and then led the army back to the camp to rest. In this battle, more than 50 spearmen died, and 200 to 300 were injured. After Su Len used physical healing, there was not much of a problem. There were no casualties among the archers, but a few of the barbarians were heavily injured. There were also hundreds of mercenaries and merchant guards who had lost their lives. Because these people had not undergone any training, they were not suitable to fight with the spearmen. So, they were grouped together with the barbarians. As a result, when the barbarians charged forward, these people also rushed forward. Most of them hadn't reached the knight level yet, and they didn't know how to cooperate with each other. They had no advantage against the orcs. Although they had killed a lot of orcs, they had also suffered heavy casualties. After returning to the camp, Su Len waited for all the soldiers, including the wounded ones, to settle down before returning to his tent. Summoning the system interface, Su Len began to check the rewards of this battle. You've won a huge victory. Congratulations, host. You've defeated an elite orc army. You've received 28,300 experience points. Your experience bar has been filled. Your level has been increased. You've received a gold treasure chest. You've received the item Star Iron X3. Your level has been increased. Current level is LV23. You've received 2 free attribute points and 2 skill points. Congratulations, host. You've received a victory. You've received a gold treasure chest. After adding the 2 free attribute points to strength, Sullen's strength had reached a shocking 49 points. He then opened the storage space and opened the gold treasure chest. 2 consecutive flashes of light, and Su Len heard the system notification sound in his ears. Congratulations, host. You've received a bottle of Big Dipper Heavenly Liquid. Congratulations, host. You've received the innate skill, Regeneration. Su Len felt a strange energy enter his body, and his body felt relaxed. The innate skill, Regeneration, had merged with his body. Su Len took out the Big Dipper Heavenly Serum and drank it directly. The light blue liquid sparkling with starlight quickly merged with his body, and a numb feeling came from his body. After a while, a warm feeling came from his body. Congratulations, host. You've consumed the Big Dipper Heavenly Serum. Your physique has increased by 3 points. After moving his body, Su Len began to check his new innate skill. Regeneration. After going through cruel training, your bloodline has awakened a mysterious ability. Your recovery speed has increased. Your recovery speed +3. There were many people who had the innate skill, Regeneration. For example, the lizard men were born with intermediate regeneration. After their arms or tails were cut off, they would regrow them after a period of time. However, the newly regrown limbs needed to be trained before they could reach the standard of the Great Path. Of course, even if the innate skill, Regeneration, was powerful, not all injuries could be healed. At the very least, if one's head was cut off, one would still die. Sullen's innate skill, Regeneration, was limited on the battlefield. The recovery speed was too slow. Of course, it did not mean that this skill was useless. This level of regeneration could quickly heal some small wounds on the body. After the skill, Regeneration, was upgraded to an advanced level, the recovery speed would be faster. If the Regeneration skill was upgraded, he would obtain the Divine Transcendence skill. Divine Transcendence was a legendary skill, and many monks wanted to obtain it. The effect of this skill was very simple. His body would always be at its peak state. At the same time, there were other benefits. However, Su Len did not have complete information about Divine Transcendence, and he could not find any specific information. In addition to the innate skill, Su Len added 2 attribute points to Physical Healing, and the skill was upgraded to Living Healing. The healing effect of Living Healing was strengthened again. One use could restore a heavily injured person to their normal state. The healing effect of living healing was indeed very strong, and this skill could continue to be upgraded. However, if he wanted to continue upgrading, he would need to fuse some other skills. For example, the 7-star lamp would become resurrection after fusing. Of course, the conditions for this resurrection were very harsh. The corpse had to be more than 90% intact, and the time of death could not be more than 2 days. There were other requirements, but they were not too important. Su Len casually opened the system interface and looked at his attributes. Name, Sullen race, human level, LV23, 8854600000, divinity, 210, demigod, strength, 49 agility, 32 spirit, 27 plus 3, tungsten steel, vitality, 36 charm, 21 command, 81 characteristics, innate skill valiant, thunderbolt, Pegasus, legendary sturdy, legendary tenacity, calm, elemental affinity, advanced lightning affinity, iron will, body hardening, beast face armor, advanced battle reflex, roll dodge, iron bones, regeneration, mana regeneration, tungsten steel, skills, mystic ice slash, living healing, life healing, crimson flame, forbidden magic, mechanical control, stone to mud, boost morale, beginner, earth spring, army rouse ultimate skills, whirling cherry, mastery, heroic, master, torrential storm, advanced, chaotic dance, beginner, silver dragon inverse scale spear, beginner, weapon proficiency, sword weapon 170, gun weapon 255, bow 122, throwing 108, horsemanship 160, thunder domain, beginner. You have begun to control the power of lightning. When you use lightning power again, it will be even more powerful. You are immune to normal lightning damage. The cost of all lightning skills will be reduced by 30%, and the power of all lightning skills will be increased by 30%. Lightning absorption, beginner. You can absorb any form of lightning attack, as well as electricity from the outside world. The absorbed lightning can strengthen your next attack, or be converted into your energy. Note, you cannot exceed the absorption limit. Thunder domain, after consuming a large amount of energy, you can create a world of lightning within 15 meters of yourself. All people or monsters that enter this area will be damaged by lightning. In this domain, your skills and strength will be increased by 100%. War roar, divine ability, beginner. You have successfully fused with the divinity of the ancestor soul troll. When you focus your mind and channel the energy to your throat, you can release an unimaginable sound wave attack. Everyone around you will be affected by the sound wave attack. They must pass the Constitution test with a difficulty of 10 plus divinity. At the same time, everyone will be affected by the sound wave attack, 10 plus divinity. If you fail to pass the test, you will be stunned. The effect will decrease as the distance increases. After dealing with everything, Su Len yawned and prepared to rest for a while. A high-intensity battle would make people nervous. The best way was to relax. Sleeping was the best way to relax. Chapter 200. The orcs had suffered a great loss in the battle last night, but they still did not give up on the idea of defeating Northgard Castle. Early the next morning, the orcs and their servants began to chop wood to make rafts on the north bank of the Whitewater River. It was obvious that they were planning to continue crossing the river. For the next few days, the two sides faced each other across the Whitewater River. The orcs made many rafts. Finally, on this morning, the orcs began their attack. To Su Luan's surprise, these beastmen actually split up into several teams and crossed the river from different areas. There were only 2,000 beastmen in northern town city. If they split up like the beastmen army, they would all be defeated by the beastmen except for the team led by Su Luan. In other words, the orcs knew that Northgard Castle had fewer people, so they used this method to cross the river. Even after the orcs split up, each group was still outnumbered by Northgard Castle. Even if Sulen wanted to defeat one group, it would take some time. The orcs would use this time to finish crossing the river and regroup. It didn't matter which team the Northgard fort attacked. The orcs had crossed the river in the end. Although Sulen was not happy, he did not attack the orcs again. Instead, he began to get into formation and prepare for the final battle. He planned to have a final battle and defeat the orcs with his true strength. When he saw the orcs crossing the river, Sulen called 2 scouts and told them to contact the centaurs. It was time to decide the outcome of this battle. Because they had enough rafts, the orcs only needed less than half an hour to cross the Whitewater River. The other scouts also sent the news. Sulen threw away the ice scale fruit that only had the core left. He then asked Aiden, "What's the situation? Where are the centaurs?" "They have already moved to the back of the orcs from the flank. They will reach their destination in an hour." Sulen nodded. "Is there any movement from the orcs?" Aiden said with a serious expression, "Not much movement. They are gathering." "Oh right, they didn't bring any supplies. They only brought some dry rations." "Didn't bring any supplies? He only brought dry rations?" It seemed like these beast men wanted to devour northern Battlefront City in one go. Sulen's lips curled into a mocking smile. He then turned around and ordered, "Inform everyone to prepare for battle." The wind howled. The flag fluttered in the wind. The muffled sound of the horn echoed across the land. Amidst the low and deep sound of the horn, a huge army slowly approached. The army was a black mass that stretched as far as the eye could see. There were more than 10,000 people in the army, and there were at least 15,000 people in the army of orcs and servants. In the middle of the army, a flag was raised high and fluttering in the wind. The flag looked very simple, with some beastman characters drawn on it. There were also a few strange-looking skeletons on the flagpole. Those were probably the heads of the other tribe leaders that the beastmen had defeated. The beastmen in front of them could be said to be at their strongest. After defeating their nemesis, the centaurs, the beastmen tribe was invincible in the wilderness. However, northern Battlefront City occupied the best place in the wilderness. Of course, the beastmen didn't want to accept such a situation. Of course, they didn't know that the northern Battlefront City's environment had become better because of the harvest altar. However, Sulen didn't think they would care even if they knew. In the northern wilderness, this was the only place that wasn't covered in snow during winter. The beastmen had lived in the wilderness for hundreds of years, and so did the Burning Blade clan. They knew what this meant. This piece of land could prevent them from dying in the winter. They didn't have to worry about the old and weak in the tribe surviving the winter. It also meant a lot of food. Therefore, once they knew that northern Battlefront City was in Sulen's hands, the conflict between them couldn't be resolved. One side had to be defeated completely. The two armies were about 2 miles apart. Neither side spoke. The entire battlefield suddenly became silent. A strong murderous aura was brewing on the battlefield. Roar! Warriors of the Burning Blade clan. We have defeated the trolls, the ogres, and the centaurs. I am proud of you. Now, we will defeat these humans in front of us. They have occupied the best land in the wilderness. As long as we occupy it, we will never starve again. The old and weak in the tribe will never freeze to death in the winter. This land was given to us by the great father god Gewushan. Now, we will take it back. Take it back. Kill all the humans. Dong dong dong. The war drums made of Kodo beast skin sounded loudly. The beastmen army and their servants began to slowly advance. Sulen chose a plain as the battlefield. On the left was the Whitewater River, and on the right was a swamp with lush water plants. The swamp was filled with reeds that were as tall as a man. It could easily hide thousands of people. However, Sulan didn't leave anything behind. Although the reeds were easy to hide, the people hiding inside would be burned alive if they were set on fire. The width of the battlefield limited the number of beastmen that could participate in the battle. A tall beastman in iron armor appeared on a high platform. Behind him was the flag of the beastmen army. Beside him were a few old beastman shamans. Ancient beastman language came from their mouths. Their voice was low but penetrating. The entire battlefield could hear them clearly. Battle song, frenzy. A strange energy swept across the battlefield. The beastmen's eyes turned red, and their breathing became heavier. As the beastman army approached, Su Luan could clearly see the first row of beastman warriors. They were wearing simple leather armor, and some of them didn't even have leather armor. They only wore a breastplate to cover their vital parts. The weapons in their hands were also a variety of weapons. There were crude maces, spiked hammers, rusty axes, and spears. It was clear that these beastmen weren't elites. There were also a large number of gnolls, bugbears, and earth goblins among them. It was clear that this army was the beastmen army's cannon fodder. They wanted to use the cannon fodder to deplete the strength and morale of the beastmen army. On the strategic map, Sulan could clearly see that behind these beastmen was the true main force of the beastmen army. At the same time, a large number of yellow dots were quickly circling around the edge of the map. Those dots were the centaurs. Over 60 ballistae were already loaded. When the beastmen cannon fodder were 500 meters away, they fired. Bang! 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 The sound of bowstrings rang out unceasingly. 62 to 3-meter-long crossbow bolts were shot out in an instant. The crossbow bolts carried great destructive power as they rushed towards the orc army. Everywhere they passed, blood mist rose. Every crossbow bolt pierced through at least 5 orcs' bodies. The barbarians didn't look at the results. With the help of a few auxiliary soldiers, they quickly reloaded the ballistae and fired again. The ballistae originally needed at least 4 adults to draw the bowstrings. Now, only one barbarian could do it. The 60 ballistae fired continuously. A large number of beastmen, bugbears, and gnolls were pierced through like candied haws. They died painfully. However, death didn't scare these people. Instead, it made them even angrier. The ground was shaking. Despite the heavy casualties, the beastmen army was still pushing forward. Their intimidating aura was stifling even from a few hundred meters away. Sulan waved his hand. Hathaway and Karina stepped forward and started casting spells. Group Haste. Group Petrifying Skin. Group Enchanted Weapon. Beams of spells buffed the warriors of the northern citadel, making them even stronger. Sulan raised his purple dragon halberd. His figure looked extremely tall under the sunlight. As the lord of the northern citadel, he had led the army to victory again and again. In the hearts of the soldiers, he was the god of war. Victory! Sulan roared. The entire army of the northern citadel was like an awakened lion. Victory! 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 The warriors of the northern citadel raised their spears and shields and roared in unison. The dull horn sounded, and a wave of high morale spread from their bodies. Sulan could raise the morale of his troops without doing anything after winning so many glorious victories. This time, he even used a morale boost. Although it was only a basic morale boost, it was even more effective than an advanced morale boost. The Beastmen army finally reached 200 meters away from the northern citadel. With a furious roar, a large number of Beastmen charged at the northern citadel's defense line. Raise your shields. Raise your spears. Longbowmen. Fire at once. A wall of shields as tall as a man was instantly erected, followed by long spears glowing with a cold light. The northern citadel army instantly turned into a giant porcupine. The archers behind the spears drew their bows and nocked their arrows. A black shadow formed by countless arrows soared into the air and landed on the beastmen army. A large number of beastmen were hit by the arrows. 200 meters wasn't a long distance. It only took a dozen seconds for the beastmen army to reach the northern citadel army, braving the arrows and the ballistas. They crashed into the wall of shields in front of them. The wall of shields shook a little, but it quickly stabilized its formation. The battle became extremely intense as soon as it started. Sulen took out the Wind Dragon flag from his storage dimension. In order to win this war, Sulen had taken out this magic item as well. Sulen sneered when he saw more and more beastmen approaching. He then injected his energy into the Wind Dragon flag. Wind Dragon Sky Spin. Violent wind elements appeared in the sky above the battlefield. A few 100-meter-tall tornadoes quickly appeared on the battlefield. A large number of wind blades spun in the tornadoes. All the beastmen, gnolls, and other monsters that got close to the tornadoes were instantly shredded by the wind blades. 8 tornadoes appeared where the beastmen army was the most concentrated. They swept away all the beastmen like the autumn wind sweeping away fallen leaves. Chapter 201. The tornadoes continued to wreak havoc. Every second, an orc would be sucked into them and sliced to pieces by the wind blades. The formation of the orc army was shaken. None of the orcs could resist the 8 tornadoes. Some of the nearby orcs were even lifted up to 100 meters into the air before being thrown back down. Even if the orcs had strong bodies, they were still smashed into a pile of minced meat at such a high altitude. The orc chieftain's eyes almost popped out of their sockets when he saw the tornadoes wreaking havoc among the orc army. However, there was nothing he could do. Even though the shamans were quite strong, they had no way to defend against such large-scale spells. A strong gust of wind blew across the army of beastmen. The army of beastmen that had been charging forward ferociously suddenly fell into chaos. The gnolls, earth goblins, and earth goblins among the army of beastmen had completely lost their minds. Even the beastmen were panicking helplessly when they saw the rain of arrows from the longbowmen of Northtown City. The pressure on the spear formation was greatly reduced. Under Sullen's command, the orcs pushed forward with their shields. They would thrust forward with every step they took. Every step they took would leave a large number of orcs injured or killed. The orc army's formation was in complete disarray under the effect of the tornado dragon. The orc army had no choice but to back off. The orc chieftain's formation was densely packed. The warriors were using the range of their spears to suppress the orcs. The tall tower shields kept the orcs' attacks at bay. The orcs were used to fighting in a disorganized formation. However, their individual strength was completely useless against the orc chieftain's formation. Their disorganized formation meant they would have to face 2 or more spears at the same time. The orcs had no advantage against the orcs in a battle like this. Even though they had the advantage of their physique, the production level of this era was not high enough for them to equip themselves with high-quality armor. This meant that when they were only wearing leather armor, the advantage of their physique would be greatly suppressed when facing the sharp spears of the Northgard city's infantry. The fact that the orc army did not fall apart while facing the tornado was already impressive. Sulen did not get carried away and asked the soldiers of the northern fortress city to launch a counterattack. Once they launched a counterattack, the infantry formation would scatter. It would be fine if the orc army fell apart and ran away, but if the orc army regrouped and launched a counterattack, the soldiers of the northern fortress city would lose their advantage. Although the orc army's vanguard had collapsed, the orc chieftain was still there. Although the middle of the orc army was hit by the tornado, they still managed to maintain their formation. The soldiers of Northern Town City drove the orc vanguard forward, wanting them to charge into the enemy formation. The Wind Dragon's heavenly spiral wreaked havoc. The gnolls, earth spirit bears, and goblins that served as auxiliary troops had completely collapsed. The remaining orcs also lost the courage to resist and scattered in all directions. For a moment, the entire battlefield was filled with scattered orc soldiers. Faced with this situation, the orc chieftain made a prompt decision. He ordered the orc soldiers to kill the scattered orcs that were charging into the formation. After the wind dragon's heavenly spiral wreaked havoc for a while, it finally ran out of energy and slowly dissipated. The orc chieftain let out a sigh of relief when he saw this. If the wind dragon's heavenly spiral continued to wreak havoc, there would be no point in fighting this battle. Although the wind dragon's heavenly spiral did not last for long, only around 10 minutes, the spell had killed at least a few thousand orcs. The number of orcs that were injured was uncountable. The northern fortress city's army kept pushing forward. Large numbers of scattered orcs were being driven away by the northern fortress city's army. The longbowmen had stopped shooting. They were recovering their strength. The shaman sorcerer's face turned serious when he saw the orc army crumbling on the battlefield. He quickly cast another spell. The awkward voice sounded again. A wild energy began to spread. The scattered orc army was shrouded by the energy. Their muscles began to swell, and their fangs protruded from their mouths. Their eyes were bloodshot. Mass bloodlust frenzy. Bloodlust frenzy was a deadly spell on the battlefield. It would unleash the potential of the target and awaken the bestial nature hidden deep in their consciousness. It was the same as a berserker's berserk. The battlefield was huge. The orc shaman sorcerer had to cast mass bloodlust frenzy together to barely cover the entire orc army. Under the effect of bloodthirsty berserk, the orcs who had already lost their courage stopped running away. Berserk reduced their rationality to the lowest level. Their bestial instincts took over their consciousness. A powerful force emerged from their bodies, making their hearts swell even more. Their sense of pain was reduced to the lowest level. Roar! An angry roar ignited the murderous intent in the orcs' hearts. Including the gnolls, goblins, and bugbears, all the orcs had forgotten their fear. They roared and charged at the northern fortress city's infantry again. Stop! Shields! Defensive formation! Sullen's face changed when he sensed the berserk aura. He immediately ordered the infantry to stop. The well-trained infantry immediately stopped moving forward. Tall tower shields slammed into the ground. Sharp spears were raised. Against the orcs' counterattack, the northern fortress city's infantry immediately completed their defense. Archers. 30 meters in front, fire at once. The archers following closely behind the spear formation immediately began to fire in unison. A rain of arrows rose from the infantry formation and fell towards the orcs. The berserk beastmen didn't even try to dodge the arrows. They braved the rain of arrows and charged towards the infantry formation. Blood and flesh flew everywhere. These beastmen had become fearless. These monsters that had no sense of reason and no sense of pain madly charged towards the infantry formation. For a moment, the pressure on the front line of the infantry formation increased greatly. Bursting fireball. Painful lash. Summon demon. Chain lightning. Seeing this, Chris Hathaway ordered Karina to cast spells at the orc army. Huge flames rose from the orc army and burned the surrounding orcs into charcoal. A blood-red dimensional door opened. A tall Vrak rushed out, followed by 4 flaming demons. As soon as they appeared in the orc army, the demons began to kill in excitement. The berserk orcs did not show any weakness. They roared and charged forward. Elemental energy surged. In an instant, a large number of orcs were killed by magic. However, even more orcs charged forward fearlessly. The Vrak started a massacre in the orc army. However, in just a few minutes, it was overwhelmed by the orc army. The 4 flaming demons had already self-detonated. However, although a few demons died, they also helped Northern Fortress City hold back a large number of orcs. The northern fortress city's army also stubbornly held on with the help of the spellcasters. Although they suffered heavy casualties, the northern fortress city's soldiers still formed an iron wall. The orcs' Mount Wolf riders also joined the battle. These Mount Wolf riders had more powerful charging power, and they didn't care about casualties at all as they charged to their deaths. Seeing this situation, Su Len picked up the Wind Dragon flag again. The Wind Dragon spiral was still on cooldown, so Su Len directly summoned a tornado. 2 tornadoes appeared on the battlefield once again. The fierce wind swept up a cloud of dust and covered the sky. This time, Su Len didn't control the tornadoes to cause great damage. Instead, he raised a cloud of dust. In an instant, the world was covered in dust and sand. The orc army was instantly shrouded in dust. Many orcs were suddenly blown into their eyes by the wind and involuntarily closed their eyes. The momentum of their charge was instantly interrupted. Many orcs were blinded by the wind and sand, unable to distinguish their direction. The thick smell of blood spread with the wind and sand. The nauseating smell was swept up. Piles of corpses covered the battlefield. In an instant, this place looked like hell on earth. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the northern fortress city's defensive army suddenly activated. The second row of soldiers immediately rushed forward and stabbed the orc soldiers blinded by the wind to death with their sharp spears. These orc soldiers couldn't resist at all. With a single charge, the orc army's counterattack was instantly interrupted. The formation was stabilized once again. The 2 tornadoes had a limited range after all. More orcs rushed forward with bloodshot eyes. Even though they suffered heavy casualties, the orcs didn't retreat. There had to be a winner in this war. Either victory or death. In the eyes of the orc commander, Northern Fortress City would be able to catch a breather after this war. If they couldn't take Northern Fortress City after such heavy casualties, their Fireblade tribe might not have another chance next time. After all, the humans had only been in this wasteland for a year. It only took a year for Northern Battlefront City to develop to such an extent. If the beast men still looked down on the humans before the war, they were now terrified of them. In such a short period of time, they were able to hold off the orc army with less than a fifth of their orcs' numbers, causing such a large number of casualties. If the orcs attacked again, they might not be able to withstand such a large number of casualties. With Northern Fortress City's development speed, if they couldn't defeat Northern Fortress City in one go, everything would be meaningless. The next time the orcs attacked, the Northern Fortress City would take the initiative to attack the orc tribe. Su Len looked at the strategic map. The Centaur army had finally circled behind the orcs. The centaurs had gathered all their youths and began to charge from behind the orc army. The centaurs, who had suffered heavy casualties, began to take revenge on their enemies. The heavy hoofbeats were like muffled thunder. The centaurs quickly crossed the distance of 10 kilometers. There were 3,000 centaurs, and many of them were females. The centaurs didn't give the orcs any chance to retaliate. The orcs who had fallen into a bloodthirsty frenzy had lost all rationality. Even the orc commander couldn't command them to turn around and attack the centaurs. A group of centaur warriors wielding spears, two-handed axes, and longbows rushed over like a flood. Their attack was like the last straw that broke the camel's back, destroying the beastmen's resistance like crushing dry weeds. Chapter 202. The centaur warriors that suddenly appeared tore through the orc army's defense line with ease. The orc soldiers were already exhausted from fighting the Northern Fortress City's soldiers, and they did not expect the centaur warriors to attack them from behind. The bloodthirsty frenzy from before had used up a lot of their stamina. Even with their powerful physique, the orcs still felt tired. Facing these centaur warriors, who were no weaker than them, they were defeated like a landslide. The orcs might be tough, but they were not fearless of death. The sudden attack of the centaurs had completely shattered their will to continue fighting. With no hope of victory in sight, the morale of the orc army dropped to the lowest point. The morale of the orc soldiers had also collapsed. The centaurs did not all charge forward. The ones at the front were all tall and muscular centaur warriors in metal armor. There were not many of them, only around 200 in total. Following behind them were 400 centaur warriors in metal scale armor, and at the very back were centaur warriors in leather armor. Another group of centaur warriors was roaming not far away, firing arrows to help the charging centaurs take care of any threats. The orc army was utterly defeated. The soldiers of Northgard City also began their counterattack. The impatient barbarian warriors swung their giant axes and charged forward. Berserk! Charge! Whirlwind slash! The orcs, who had lost all will to resist, were like lambs waiting to be slaughtered. Wherever the barbarian warriors went, all the enemies were cut down. The barbarians' charge caused the orcs' already disorganized formation to become even more chaotic. The soldiers of Northgard City behind the barbarians were able to harvest the orcs more easily. Orc chieftain Gottenron's face was ashen. He never thought that the situation would deteriorate to such an extent. A mere 2,000-strong human army actually blocked the attack of his 10,000-strong orc army in a head-on battle. There were actually several powerful spellcasters in this newly developed territory. Weren't the nobles of the newly developed territories all from the side branches that weren't valued? The nobles of the side branches that weren't valued were able to recruit so many powerful spellcasters. Disregarding everything else, the wizard who cast the Wind Dragon Whirlwind on the battlefield was definitely close to or had already reached the legendary realm. With such power, which one of the human kingdoms wasn't a noble? Why would they need to spend so much effort to come to such a remote place to start their own business? How much did it cost to hire a legendary level spellcaster? That was an astronomical figure. In the human kingdoms, legendary magi were all famous masters of their own regions. In the end, a suspected legendary spellcaster had suddenly appeared on the battlefield, and with a battlefield spell, the orc army that had the upper hand almost collapsed. If the shaman wizards had not used bloodthirsty berserk, the orc army would have collapsed long ago. However, the orc army had reached its limit, and just as they had stabilized their position, the centaurs suddenly appeared from behind. Fighting on two fronts was a taboo in the first place, not to mention that the orc army had been ambushed by the cavalry. They did not even have a decent defensive line. Being attacked from the front and the back directly caused the orc army to collapse completely. What Gottenron Fireblade did not know was that the one who cast the spell was not a legendary wizard, but Sulen with the help of a magic tool. There wasn't a single legendary level spell caster in the northern provinces, but there were a few legendary level warriors. After all, wizards were precious. Even though there were 2 grand wizard level spell casters in northern Battlefront City, it was still very difficult for them to cross that hurdle. Just by looking at their long experience bars, one could tell how difficult it was to level up. The threshold of becoming a legendary level spell caster stopped more than 90% of the spell casters. The one in northern Battlefront City who was most likely to become a legendary level spell caster was Hathaway. No matter if it was Karina or Grace, they were still lacking. The orc army began to collapse. Up until now, more than 5,000 orcs had died in the battle, including many gnolls, bugbears, and goblins. There were also countless injured. Moreover, with the constant pursuit of the centaurs and the soldiers of northern Battlefront City, the number of casualties was increasing. Now, the only orc army that had not collapsed was the orc chieftain led by the orc chieftain. Sulen looked at the only orc army that had not collapsed, where the orc chieftain was. Sulen did not plan to let the orc chieftain leave alive. It didn't matter if some ordinary orcs escaped, but the orc chieftain and the orc shaman could not be let go. Without the orc chieftain and the shaman, even if there were many orcs left, they could only struggle at death's door. However, if the orc chieftain and the orc shaman escaped, it would not take long for them to raise a new orc chieftain. Sulen did not want to give them another chance to rise again. With a casual swing of his halberd, Surin beheaded an orc warrior who was still resisting. Scarlet blood spurted out, and with another swing of his halberd, he sent another orc warrior flying. Surin then led the Lord's Guard to charge towards the orc chief. The orc chieftain's strength was not to be underestimated. Other than Surin himself, no one else was his match. The centaurs intentionally avoided the orc chieftain's location. After all, their chieftain had already died in the night of the battle. If it wasn't for the centaur chieftain holding back the orc chieftain and the other orc warriors, the centaurs wouldn't have been able to escape with more than 3,000 people. Barbarian guards, charge with me. Su Luan roared as he took the lead and charged towards the orc chieftain's position. The dozen barbarian warriors behind him roared as they followed closely behind. With Su Luan as the arrowhead and the barbarian warriors as the flanks, they formed a simple arrow formation. They pierced through the chaotic orc formation and rushed straight ahead. All the orcs in front of Su Luan were either stabbed to death or sent flying. The two sides were closing in on each other at a very fast speed. The orc chieftain Gotenran, who was gathering the orc army to retreat, naturally saw Su Luan approaching rapidly. However, he did not avoid him. Instead, he took the initiative to meet him. Initially, Gotenran had accepted his defeat and was ready to escape the battlefield. In a situation where the army was completely defeated, even a legendary warrior like him would not be of much help. However, Sullen's initiative to attack gave him hope of victory once again. As long as the orc chieftain was killed, there would still be hope for the orcs to turn the tables. Gotenran, who had lost, naturally did not know that this was the result of Sullen's special preparation. If Su Luan did not fight, Gotenran would definitely lead a group of orcs to retreat. That was not what Su Luan wanted to see. Berserk. Seeing the orc chieftain and the orc warriors who took the initiative to meet him, the barbarian guards immediately went into a berserk state. Their eyes were instantly filled with blood, and the muscles on their arms expanded like balloons. The hideous green veins were exposed like earthworms. Their chests were like bellows as they exhaled rapidly. Blood rushed through their bodies, and a violent force spread throughout their bodies. Bang! The sound of metal clashing rang out, followed by the ear-piercing sound of sharp blades cutting through flesh and bones. The orc warriors beside the orc chieftain also did not participate in the battle. They were all full of energy, but in the face of the barbarians in a berserk state, these orc warriors were still no match. As soon as they came into contact, a few of them were cut in half along with their weapons. As soon as the barbarian warrior killed an orc, the orc behind him chopped at his body with a giant axe. Although the orc's weapon was not good, the powerful force still left a deep mark on the barbarian warrior's armor. Fortunately, the armor that Su Luan had prepared for the barbarian warrior was of the best quality, so it was not cut open. Only a deep axe mark was left. The powerful impact made the barbarian warrior frown, but he did not hesitate in his movements. With a twirl of his two-handed axe, a cold light flashed, and a hideous head flew out. Su Luan swept his halberd, and the powerful force directly sent the orc warrior who had rushed up flying. Then, he rushed towards the unusually tall orc. When Gotenran saw Su Luan rushing towards him, he was not afraid at all. He also rushed up with a roar. He swung the heavy two-handed axe with one hand as if it was weightless. At the same time, he swung a machete with the other hand, directly blocking all of Sullen's dodging space. No matter which angle he dodged from, Su Luan had to choose between the giant axe and the machete. Never underestimate any legendary profession, even the warriors who were called boorish by other legendary professions. Any warrior who grew from a low level to a legendary profession would have experienced countless battles. The talents and various combat skills they had mastered were definitely terrifying. Disregarding any spell-like abilities, just by relying on their own attributes, talents, and combat skills, any legendary warrior could be called a master. Earth-splitting slash. Gotenron's heavy two-handed axe carried a biting cold blade as it viciously chopped towards Sullen's head. The machete attacked from the other side at a tricky angle. The two different weapons in his hands cooperated very well. Clang! There was a loud sound of metal clashing. Sullen's purple dragon halberd blocked the two-handed axe directly. Then, he twisted his body and dodged the machete behind him. In the next second, Sulen moved his feet. The purple dragon halberd in his hand directly bounced the two-handed axe away. The blade of the halberd drew a beautiful arc and pierced towards the opponent's chest. The previous head-on collision let Sulen know that the orc chief's strength was not as strong as his. The more ferocious the attack, the greater the rebound force. Sulen used the rebound force to directly raise the orc chief's weapon and then stabbed towards the orc chief's chest. Gotenron barely managed to avoid the vital parts. A sharp pain came from his chest. Roll and dodge. Gotenron let out a crazy roar. The machete instantly swept over. Compared to the giant axe, the machete's speed was much faster. The sharp blade carried a chilling intent. Sulen tilted his body and rolled to dodge, rolling out of the attack range of the machete. Chapter 203. After dodging the orc chief's attack, Sulen rushed forward again. He did not intend to give the orc chief any chance to catch his breath. Thunder lightning spear. A surge of lightning energy burst out from Sulen's body. Sulen did not activate his territory. The continuous use of powerful spells had severely depleted the energy in his body. Activating his territory would not last long. Sulen's halberd swept across, and the sound of metal colliding rang out. The powerful lightning energy was instantly transmitted to Gotenron's body through the weapon, causing his body to feel slightly numb. After advancing to the legendary rank, there were very few purebred warriors. They were too easy to counter. A wizard could trap him for a few hours with a maze spell. The lightning paralyzed Gotenron's body for a moment. Although it was only for a short moment, in a battle between legendary ranks, such a moment of weakness could be exploited. The purple dragon halberd attacked like a storm, and Gotenron, who was one step too slow, could only parry in a wretched manner. However, with every attack, a bolt of lightning would be transmitted over. Soon, enough lightning had accumulated, and it would explode instantly. Gotenron's body instantly stiffened, and blood gushed out from his mouth. Gotenron's abdomen was sliced open by the purple dragon halberd. The paralysis effect caused by the lightning energy was very difficult for him. Sulen relied on the paralysis effect of the lightning energy to gain the upper hand in close combat. As long as the opponent's resistance did not exceed the limits of the lightning energy, after a long period of accumulation, it would eventually cause paralysis. Damned human! In just a few exchanges, the orc chief had been injured repeatedly. The pain of his wounds had some effect on his body. Sulen's cold gaze was fixed on the orc chief. The orc chief, who was proficient in dual wielding, swept his giant axe horizontally. At the same time, he swung his machete heavily at Sulen. He wanted to tear the damned human in front of him into two halves. Under his furious attack, his might became even stronger. Chaotic dance. The purple dragon halberd left behind afterimages as it constantly clashed with the orc chief's weapon. For a moment, the sounds of explosions were endless. The battle between the two sides became more and more intense. The ground within a radius of more than 10 meters was filled with deep cracks. A biting cold blade swept past Sulen's eyes, leaving gashes on his body. There were no longer any living creatures around the two of them. Everyone who dared to come close had already become corpses. The orc chief was powerful. Although he was injured, Sulen could not take advantage of his fearless fighting style. The lightning on Sulen's purple dragon halberd shone brightly and then exploded in an instant. The powerful lightning energy once again caused the orc chief's body to stiffen for a moment. Seeing this opportunity, Sulen exerted force on his feet and pounced forward like a ghost. After dodging the orc chief's giant axe, Sulen turned around and was already on his right side. The purple dragon halberd in his hand turned into a stream of light and pierced towards the enemy's heart. The orc chief, who had been thwarted time and time again, seemed to have gone mad. He did not dodge at all and swung his machete at Sulen. Looking at his posture, he was completely prepared to die together with Sulen. Encountering such a situation again, Sulen's eyes shone with a cold light. Lightning spear. A spear completely made of lightning appeared in Sulen's hand. Immediately after, the purple dragon halberd swept horizontally and blocked the orc chief's weapon. The lightning spear in his left hand was instantly thrown out. The lightning exploded and the lightning spear instantly hit the orc chief. Gotenron only had time to avoid being hit in his vitals. A bloody hole the size of a bowl appeared on the right side of his chest. The powerful electric current turned the flesh and blood around it into charcoal. Sulen's breathing was a little hurried. Continuous high-intensity bursts of energy had taken a toll on his body. The short burst of energy had caused his body to feel a little empty. However, his current physique was already extraordinary. In just 1 or 2 seconds, Sulen had already adjusted his breathing. Physique not only affected his physical limits but also determined his endurance in battle. His extraordinary physique allowed his body to recover very quickly. The orc chief before him was in a much more miserable state. Several wounds had appeared on his body, especially his chest, which had been hit by the lightning spear. If not for the orc chief's strong physique, he would have died. However, even if he did not die, Gotenron's condition was not good. His lungs were injured, causing his breathing to become more hurried. The damage to his internal organs had caused his physical fitness to plummet. Although a legendary warrior's physique was so strong that he could continue to fight for a few minutes even if his heart was injured, this did not mean that he was invincible. Clearly aware of his current condition, the orc chief did not care about anything else and charged forward to attack. He was obviously prepared to die together with Sulen. However, at this point, Gotenron was no longer Sulen's opponent. Silver Dragon Inversed Scales Spear. The spear danced in the air and a huge dragon shadow appeared. Sulen did not dodge. The silver light filled the sky and instantly pierced through the orc chief's huge body. Immediately after, blood gushed out crazily. Gotenron's huge body stiffened and did not move. After the silver dragon's shadow dissipated, the bloodied body collapsed. With the death of the orc chief, no one in the orc army dared to resist. Everyone began to flee. As there was a river on one side of the battlefield, many orcs who panicked and did not know where to go jumped into the water and swam to the other side. However, the Whitewater River was very deep and there were many undercurrents underwater. Many orcs who were not good at swimming were swept away by the undercurrents. At the same time, a large number of archers also shot at the orcs in the river. For a time, the orcs on the river suffered heavy casualties. More and more orcs began to flee in all directions. However, in terms of speed, they were no match for the centaurs. How could the centaurs, who hated the orcs, let go of this opportunity to beat them while they were down? The 3,000 centaurs split into small groups of dozens and began to chase after the orcs on the battlefield. The army of the northern battlefront city also spread out and began to chase after the orcs. At the same time, some orcs who had no hope of escaping began to surrender. Some of them began to capture captives. However, there were not many captives this time. Only a small number of orcs surrendered. Of course, this was also because the hatred between the orcs and centaurs was too deep. If the orcs surrendered, the centaurs would most likely not accept it. After the orc army fled in all directions, the army of the northern battlefront city stopped chasing. The army of the northern battlefront city was wearing heavy armor. Naturally, they were not fast enough. Hence, the task of chasing after the orcs was left to the centaurs. With the speed of the centaurs, it was difficult for the orcs to escape. After the centaurs chased after the orcs, the soldiers of the northern battlefront city began to clean up the battlefield and save the injured. Sulen also began to cast physique healing on the heavily injured. The number of casualties was quickly calculated. Although the northern battlefront city had defeated the orcs, they had suffered the most casualties ever since they came to the wasteland. More than half of the spearmen were killed. The death toll was more than 300. Among them, 200 of the mercenaries and merchant guards were killed. The northern battlefront city had lost 600 people this time. However, despite the heavy casualties, many of the human soldiers had successfully leveled up in this battle. Many elite spearmen had become heavy-armored spearmen. Some of the heavy-armored spearmen had even become spear imperial guards. The spear imperial guards were the ultimate type of spearmen. However, it did not mean that they were the end of the line. If a spear imperial guard wanted to become a formation breaker, they had to be the best of the best. The success rate was very low. There were more than 2,000 orcs, gnolls, earth goblins, and bugbears in total. About 6,000 to 7,000 of them had died on the battlefield. The rest had already fled. Karina Hathaway and the others ordered the soldiers to clean up the battlefield. Chris ordered the slaves to dig holes and bury the corpses. With so many deaths, if they were not dealt with in time, a plague might break out. At the same time, the bodies of the dead soldiers were cremated. Their ashes were placed in urns and sent to the martyrs' cemetery according to the northern battlefront city's ceremony. Sulen also began to check the rewards of this battle. Congratulations, host. You have successfully defeated the orc army. You have achieved an epic victory. Your name will spread far and wide across the wasteland. Orc invasion, year 1687 of the Huiyue calendar. Early April. After the orcs defeated the centaurs, they turned their attention to the northern battlefront city. In order to take over the city, they began to wage war against the northern battlefront city. Under your command, the northern battlefront city won this glorious victory. When the orcs were exhausted, the centaurs charged out and defeated the orc army. They even killed the orc Gotenron in this battle. Reputation plus 15. Congratulations, host. You have defeated the orc army. You have received 62,300 experience points. Congratulations, host. You have won the battle. You have defeated the orc army. You have received 2 gold chests. You have received the item reinforcement order. Congratulations, host. You have killed the orc chieftain. You have received 21,200 experience points. You have received a platinum chest. You have received a legendary talent point. Your talents, Iron Bones and Regeneration, have been upgraded. Congratulations, host. Your experience bar is full. Your level has been upgraded. You are now level 24. You have received 1 gold chest. You have received 2 attribute points and 2 skill points. With the constant prompts in his ears, Su Luan began to check his harvest this time. He had received 3 gold chests and 1 platinum chest. Su Len opened his inventory and began to check. After 3 flashes of spiritual light, Su Luan heard the prompt sound of the system. Congratulations, host. You have received a wisdom leaf. Congratulations, host. You have received soldier training notes. Congratulations, host. You have received a recruitment order. After 3 consecutive system notifications, Su Len began to look at the remaining platinum chest. He then took a deep breath and chose to open it. With a flash of light, Su Len heard the system notification. Congratulations, host. You have received a special soldier's seal, Formation Breaker. Hearing the system notification, Sullen's eyes lit up. The Formation Breaker was a special troop class. It just so happened that there were a few spearmen who had reached the level of the Spear Guard. Su Len planned to give it a try. If he succeeded, he would earn a lot. If not, he would not lose anything. Chapter 204. After this battle, Sulan's strength increased once again. Similarly, although the northern city army suffered heavy casualties, they also gained a lot of experience. After this battle, many people were promoted. Although the total number of people was lower, their strength had increased compared to before. Su Luan took out the recruitment order he had just issued and chose to use it directly. Su Luan had found that the recruitment order had a lot to do with his fame or prestige. At first, he only recruited some barbarians, but the last time he used it, he had recruited a tribe of 500 half-elves. He didn't know what kind of people he could recruit this time after defeating the orcs. After using the recruitment order, Su Len took out the book, Training Troops. This book was written by Qi Xiaobao of the Ming dynasty in his previous life. He didn't expect to find a military book. There were many famous military books in his previous life, such as Sun Tzu's Art of War, Meng Da's New Book, Sun Bin's Art of War, Wei Liaozi, Lu Tao, and so on. However, these military books were more about strategy. These books were good, but there were very few people who could understand and use them flexibly. Moreover, many of the books were written in fog, making it difficult for people to understand them. Training Troops was different. This book was called a military book, but in reality, it was mostly about training troops. There were very few things about strategy. In terms of depth, it couldn't be compared to Sun Tzu's Art of War, which focused on strategy and politics, but it was much more practical. Out of 100 people who studied Sun Tzu's Art of War, there wouldn't be a single person who was successful. However, if one studied Training Troops, as long as they followed the book's instructions, the soldiers they trained wouldn't be bad. The content of Training Troops was very broad. It covered the selection of soldiers, the organization of troops, flags and drums, weapons and equipment, the training of generals, military etiquette and military law, the organization of chariots and cavalry, as well as the training of soldiers and soldiers. In ancient times, there were very few military books that were so detailed. If one followed this book, they could definitely train an elite army. Training Troops, a book that records the training of soldiers, battle, command, and other military skills in detail. After using Training Speed plus 15, Elite plus 5, Command plus 15, Discipline plus 20. Obtain skill, like Arm Command, Command like an arm. After using it, you can quickly command the army to get into formation and deploy troops. Su Len chose to use it immediately. In the next second, soldier training records turned into a stream of light and merged into Sulan's body. Suddenly, a large amount of training methods and experiences appeared in Sulan's mind. There were even some videos. What surprised him even more was that the videos were all of Qi Xiaobao's training. What better way to learn than to personally experience Qi Xiaobao's training? This military training record really gave him a big surprise. Furthermore, he could access these images at any time. They would only disappear after he had mastered them. Su Len opened the system panel. In the commander column, his commander points had increased from the original 81 to 96. Iron Bone, and Regeneration, had also been raised to the intermediate level. Middle Steel Bones, after the brutal training, your resistance has been increased. All attacks that deal damage to you will be reduced by 20%, normal weapons are ineffective against you. Intermediate Regeneration, after the cruel training, your bloodline has awakened a magical ability. Your recovery speed has increased. Your recovery speed has increased by 5. Su Len was still preparing to add the 2 free attribute points to his strength. Sulan's strength broke through to 50, but the remaining attribute point indicated that it was not enough and could not be added. After the attribute point reached 50, if he wanted to add another 3 attribute points, he would need to add another 3 attribute points. Seeing this situation, Su Len directly added the remaining attribute point to his spirit. The 2 skill points that he did not learn any new skills were also kept. As for the legendary talent points that he had obtained from killing the orc chieftain, Su Len used them to upgrade his talent, Advanced Battle Reflex. After using it, the original Advanced Battle Reflex became Legendary Battle Reflex. Legendary Battle Reflex: after a long period of hard training, your body's reflexes have become instinctive. After receiving a sudden attack or sneak attack, your body will automatically defend and counterattack. Obtained skill: Reactive Attack. Reactive attack: after receiving an attack, seize the opportunity to counterattack. This counterattack will ignore 50% of the target's defense and attack speed will increase by 50%. Reactive Attack. With this effect, it could be said that he was no longer afraid of sneak attacks. Those who attacked him had a higher chance of being counterattacked by him. With his current attack speed, if he increased it by 50%, how many people could dodge it? After Su Len finished adding the attribute points, he closed the attribute panel and took out the remaining items. There was only the Wisdom Leaf, the Reinforcement Order, and a Special Formation Breaker. Su Len planned to leave the Wisdom Leaf for Hathaway. This item would be more effective for her. The Reinforcement Order could be used to recruit war spirits from the other world. Now that the war was over, he did not need it for the time being. He would use it when he returned to Northern Town. The last item was the Special Formation Breaker. This was the first special troop that Su Len had obtained. The Formation Breaker's Formation Breaker was a Tiger Formation Breaker. It looked very delicate. Formation Breaker. After using it, you can train a special elite troop of the Formation Breaker. They are brave and good at fighting. They are unstoppable. They have the determination to break through enemy lines. Recruitment: 700 people. Recruitment requirements: Spear Guard. Recruitment requires 100 units of food. Kinnar 200. Training success rate is 20%. After seeing the recruitment requirements of the Formation Breaker, Su Len frowned. According to the requirements, if he wanted to gather 700 Formation Breaker, he would need at least 3,500 Spear Guards. Although the Spear Guards were leveled up from the Spear Guards, it was not easy to reach level 5. After going through so many fierce battles, there were only 3 or 4 Spear Guards in the Spear Guards. He now had no more than 400 Spear Guards. If he wanted to form the Formation Breaker, he estimated that he would need to recruit at least 10,000 Spear Guards. But so far, the total population of Northern Town did not even add up to 10,000 people. It would take a long time to form the Formation Breaker. But he was not in a hurry now. After defeating the Orc army, there was no tribe in this area that could be a match for Northern Town. He had enough time to slowly form the Formation Breaker. My lord. Just as Su Len packed up everything, a drow hurried over. Sullen's heart tightened. Did something happen again? He quickly asked, what happened? My lord, we found this when we were cleaning up the battlefield. The drow handed over a gemstone that looked like an amethyst. But compared to the amethyst, this gemstone was more beautiful. There was also a strange power in it. It was like the power of the soul, but also like the divine power of the temple priest. Battle Soul Stone. Seeing this gemstone, Su Len recognized it at a glance. It was a Battle Soul Stone. The Battle Soul Stone was a special kind of soul stone. It was rare and didn't have many uses. The temple would only use it when building the Hall of Valhalla. This Battle Soul Stone could connect to the kingdom of the god they believed in and summon the Valhalla to fight. On Sullen's construction list, there were 2 buildings of wonders that required Battle Soul Stones. One of them was the Triumphal Arch, and the other was the Hall of Valhalla. Su Len didn't have the blueprint for the Hall of Wonders at the moment, but he had already obtained the blueprint for the other building, the Triumphal Arch. The Hall of Valhalla needed to be upgraded to the Cemetery of Heroes first. Only then could he build the Hall of Wonders according to the blueprint. Su Lan didn't know the specific properties of the Hall of Valhalla, but from the description, it should be able to summon the dead soldiers of Northern Town and fight as Valhalla. Of course, the Hall of Wonders had more than that. If he wanted to know, he would have to wait until he obtained the blueprint. The Battle Soul Stone in front of him was crystal clear. There were almost no impurities in it, and it was about 10 centimeters in size. This was a high-quality Battle Soul Stone and was very suitable for the Triumphal Arch. With the Battle Soul Stone, the construction of the Triumphal Arch of Wonders needed to be put on the agenda. The Triumphal Arch of Wonders required a large amount of white marble and a master sculptor. The marble needed to be mined in the Sierra de Lotus. There were a few master sculptors in Northern Town City, and Su Lan planned to start the preparation work after he went there. He was looking forward to the second Hall of Wonders in his territory. Thump, thump, thump. The sound of hurried hooves sounded. Su Lan turned around and saw a group of centaur soldiers galloping over. The one at the front was Mission. This little mare was wearing beautiful chainmail. She held a spear in her hand and a bow at her waist. Her soft hair was tied behind her head with some simple accessories. She looked very valiant. Soon, the group of centaurs arrived before them, and the guards who were standing guard at the periphery stopped them. "Stop. I want to see Sir Su Lan." The little mare stopped and said. "Let her come over," Su Lan said to the guard. The guard put away his weapon and moved aside. "What do you want?" Su Lan smiled at the little mare in front of him. Mihian smiled, and then his face became serious. He saluted Su Luan very formally and said, "Thank you, Mr. Su Luan, for lending a helping hand to our tribe in times of crisis and helping us complete our revenge. You are the most distinguished guest of our tribe." "Huh, why are you suddenly so formal?" Su Lan said with a smile. "Besides, the beast men are also my enemies. This is a cooperation between allies." Mission shook her head and said, "I've seen too many allies stab each other in the back." Su Lan smiled and said, "How are the beast men now?" "They all escaped. My people are still chasing after them. I estimate that less than 1,000 of them will survive." You're tuning into the Unparalleled SwordWill YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.